A single father watches his Christmas blind date walk away in disgust the moment she sees his daughter's photo. Humiliated and alone in a crowded restaurant, Ethan Cole reaches for his coat, ready to surrender to loneliness forever. Then a stranger's voice cuts through the holiday noise. "Would you consider being my husband?" The woman is elegant, composed, and completely serious. In that instant, two broken souls recognize something in each other. A desperate need for family, for belonging, for one more chance at happiness. What happens next will test everything they thought they knew about love, courage, and second chances. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it touches your heart, hit that like button and stay until the very end. The restaurant hummed with forced Christmas cheer, laughter too loud, conversations too bright, as if everyone was desperately trying to prove they belonged to this festive night. Ethan Cole sat at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a water glass he hadn't touched, watching condensation slide down the sides like tiny tears. Across from him, the empty chair mocked him with its vacancy. She'd been gone for 7 minutes. He'd counted every one. Vanessa, that was her name, though it hardly mattered now, had made it exactly 14 minutes into their blind date before finding her exit strategy. The moment she'd asked to see a photo of his daughter, Ethan should have known. He'd pulled out his phone with the same mixture of pride and dread he always felt, showing her the lock screen. Sophie, gap-toothed and grinning, chocolate ice cream smeared across her chin from last summer. Vanessa's smile had frozen. Actually frozen, like someone had pressed pause on her face. "She's beautiful," she'd said, the words coming out in that particular tone people used when they were about to disappoint you. "How old?" 7. She'll be 8 in March." "That's great." Vanessa had glanced at her watch, an obvious tell. "And her mother?" "Passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." The conversation had lasted another 2 minutes, tops. Vanessa had excused herself to the restroom and simply never came back. Ethan had watched her slip out the front entrance, pulling her coat tight against the December cold, her heels clicking against the pavement in rapid retreat. He should have been used to it by now. This was the 5th time in 8 months. Different women, different restaurants, same ending. The setup varied. Sometimes they lasted through appetizers, once through an entire meal. But the conclusion was always identical. Single father, widower, baggage. Too complicated. Not what they signed up for. Ethan signaled for the check, humiliation burning in his chest like swallowed fire. Around him, couples leaned close over candlelit tables, sharing desserts and intimate laughter. A family 3 tables over, mom, dad, 2 kids, argued cheerfully over which Christmas movie to watch when they got home. The normalcy of it all felt like a personal insult. "Separate checks?" the waiter asked, appearing with practiced discretion. "Just one." Ethan's voice came out rougher than intended. She had to leave." The waiter's expression shifted to professional sympathy. He'd clearly seen this before. "I'm sorry, sir. The holidays can be tough." Ethan nodded, pulling out his wallet with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let themselves. He was 34 years old, and he'd forgotten what it felt like to not be rejected. Not by choice, anyway. After Claire died, he'd spent 2 years in a fog of grief and single parenting, barely surviving each day. When he'd finally felt ready to try again, ready to let someone new into the life he'd rebuilt from ashes, he'd discovered a brutal truth. Being a widower with a young daughter made him essentially undateable. Too much history, too much responsibility, too much need. The waiter returned with the check, and Ethan signed it quickly, adding a generous tip because the humiliation wasn't the kid's fault. He was reaching for his coat when a voice stopped him cold. "Excuse me." The voice was calm, controlled, with an unexpected warmth underneath. Ethan looked up. A woman stood beside his table, mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a charcoal gray dress that spoke of professional success and careful choices. She had the kind of face that was striking rather than conventionally pretty. Strong jawline, intelligent dark eyes, a mouth that looked like it smiled rarely, but meant it when it did. "I'm sorry to intrude," she continued, her hands clasped in front of her in a gesture that seemed both nervous and determined. but I couldn't help overhearing part of your evening. Ethan felt his face flush. Great. Now strangers were witnessing his humiliation. Look, I'm fine. I was just leaving. Would you consider being my husband? The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Ethan's brain simply refused to process them for several seconds. Around them, the restaurant noise continued, clinking glasses, scraping chairs, Christmas music playing too softly to identify the song. But in their small bubble of space, everything had gone completely still. I'm sorry, what? Ethan finally managed. The woman didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't indicate this was any kind of joke. I know how that sounds. I promise I'm not insane, though I'm aware that's exactly what an insane person would say. A flicker of dry humor crossed her face. My name is Marianne Voss. I'm sitting at the table behind you, the one by the window. I'm also here on a blind date. Or I was. Ethan glanced past her and spotted a table where a man in an expensive suit was speaking animatedly into his phone, gesturing with his free hand, completely ignoring the untouched meal in front of him. As Ethan watched, the man stood up, still talking, and headed toward the door without a backward glance. He got a work call 15 minutes into dinner, Marianne said, following Ethan's gaze. Apparently his time is worth $300 an hour, and he couldn't possibly waste it on someone who isn't a client. He explained this in detail before leaving. She turned back to Ethan, something hard glinting in her eyes. I'm a corporate attorney. I bill $400 an hour. I didn't mention it because I thought we were on a date, not a business meeting. Despite everything, Ethan felt a surprised laugh escape. That's impressively terrible, isn't it? Marianne's expression softened slightly. Look, I realize I just propositioned a complete stranger in the most bizarre way possible. But I've been sitting here alone, watching you be rejected for apparently having a daughter and being a devoted father, and something in me just snapped. She pulled out the chair Vanessa had abandoned and sat down without asking permission, a bold move that somehow didn't feel invasive. Up close, Ethan could see the fine lines around her eyes, the careful makeup that couldn't quite hide exhaustion, the expensive watch on her wrist that probably cost more than his car. I'm 36 years old, Marianne said, her voice taking on a matter-of-fact quality. I've spent the last 15 years building a career winning cases, making partner at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. I own a 3-bedroom condo downtown, I have a retirement plan, and I haven't had a meaningful relationship in 7 years. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it again. This woman, this complete stranger, was systematically dismantling every social convention about how people were supposed to meet and talk. Everyone I date falls into 2 categories, Marianne continued. Men who are intimidated by my success and feel emasculated by my income, or men who are attracted to my success and see me as a trophy wife who can fund their lifestyle. I'm 36. I want a family. I want a child, but I'm tired of pretending to be less than I am or defending myself for being more. She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes searching Ethan's face with an intensity that made him feel exposed and oddly safe at the same time. You were just rejected by a woman who couldn't handle the fact that you're a father, that you have responsibilities and a past, and a beautiful daughter who deserves love. And I'm sitting here thinking, why are we all pretending? Why are we following these ridiculous dating rules that clearly don't work? Why can't 2 people who want the same things just be honest about it? Ethan's throat felt tight. You don't even know me. No, I don't. But I know you showed up tonight despite probably expecting rejection. I know you carry a photo of your daughter on your lock screen and talk about her with pride instead of apology. I know you tipped that waiter 30% even though your date walked out on you. Marianne's voice softened. I know you're still wearing your wedding ring on a chain around your neck. I can see the outline under your shirt. I know you're scared and lonely, and probably think you don't deserve another chance at happiness. Ethan's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, where Claire's ring rested against his sternum, warm from body heat. He'd moved it from his finger 2 years ago, but couldn't bring himself to take it off completely. How did you? I notice things. It's what makes me good at my job. Marianne smiled, and it transformed her entire face into something genuine and vulnerable. Look, I'm not proposing we get married tomorrow. I'm not even sure what I'm proposing, honestly, but I'm proposing something. A conversation, a possibility, a chance to stop playing games that neither of us wants to play. The restaurant continued its Christmas celebration around them, oblivious to the strange negotiation happening at table 12. Ethan's mind raced, trying to catch up with the surreal turn his evening had taken. This woman, this accomplished, composed stranger, was offering him something he'd stopped believing existed: honesty. No pretense, no games, no slow reveal of deal breakers 3 months in. "I have a daughter," he said, testing the words that usually ended conversations. "She's the center of my life. Everything I do is for her. Every decision I make considers her first. If that's going to be a problem, why would that be a problem?" Marianne interrupted. "That's called being a good father. That's called having your priorities straight." She paused, something vulnerable flickering across her face. "I've spent 15 years avoiding relationships because I was afraid they'd derail my career. Now I have the career and I've realized what I actually want is someone to come home to, a family, a child who calls me mom. I don't want to start from scratch. I want what you have, a ready-made family with a man who knows how to put someone else first." "You don't know what you're saying." Ethan shook his head, feeling the familiar weight of other people's expectations settling onto his shoulders. "Kids are hard. Single parenting is harder. Sophie's been through trauma, losing her mother. She needs stability, not someone trying on the role of parent like it's a coat they can take off when it gets uncomfortable." "You're right. I don't know what I'm saying." Marianne's voice took on an edge. "I'm improvising wildly here because the normal way of doing things has failed me spectacularly. But I know what I don't want. I don't want to wake up at 45 and realize I let fear talk me out of every meaningful connection. I don't want to keep going on dates with men who can't handle a successful woman or who see a child as an inconvenience instead of a blessing." She stood up abruptly, and Ethan felt an unexpected pang of loss, but she didn't leave. Instead, she pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, and showed him the screen, a contact card with her name and number. "I'm staying at the Grandview Hotel, room 412. I'm in town for a case. I usually work out of the Chicago office." Marianne's voice remained steady, but Ethan could see her hands trembling slightly. "I'm here until after New Year's. If you want to have a real conversation, not a blind date, not a performance, just two honest people talking about what they actually want, call me. Or don't. But either way, stop letting people make you feel like being a devoted father is something to apologize for." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at him with an expression that was equal parts defiant and terrified. "For what it's worth, your date was an idiot. Any woman who walks away from a man who loves his child that much isn't worth your time." Then she was gone, weaving through tables toward the exit with her head high and her shoulders back, leaving Ethan sitting alone with a stranger's phone number and the strangest offer he'd ever received. He sat there for a long moment, his mind a chaos of confusion, hope, and disbelief. The waiter appeared to clear Vanessa's unused place setting, tactfully saying nothing about the second woman who'd visited Ethan's table. Around him, the restaurant began transitioning from dinner service to late-night drinks, couples migrating to the bar area, families with young children heading toward the exits. Ethan pulled out his phone and looked at Sophie's face again. Gap-toothed grin, chocolate mustache, pure joy captured in a single moment. She'd been 4 when Claire died, old enough to understand Mommy was gone, young enough to need constant reassurance that Daddy wasn't going anywhere. The last 3 years had been a tightrope walk of grief and resilience, therapy sessions and bedtime stories, teaching himself to braid hair and navigate little girl emotions while managing his own shattered heart. He'd rebuilt their life piece by piece. Stable job as a mechanical engineer at a small firm that valued work-life balance. Modest house in a good school district. Routines that gave Sophie security. Therapy for both of them. Slowly, painfully, they'd found their footing as a family of 2. But Sophie asked about having a mom sometimes. Not often, but enough to break his heart each time. She'd see other families at school pickups, watch movies about mothers and daughters, grow quiet in ways that told him she was thinking about the woman-shaped hole in their lives. Ethan had tried dating carefully, terrified of introducing Sophie to someone who might leave. But somehow, every relationship ended before it got that far. Women who claimed to be okay with his daughter invariably revealed their true feelings, the ones who saw Sophie as competition for his attention or as an obstacle to spontaneity, or simply as a reminder that Ethan came with complications they weren't ready to handle. He'd started believing he had to choose, be a good father or find love. Apparently he couldn't have both. And now this stranger, this bold, slightly terrifying attorney, was suggesting a third option he'd never considered. Honesty from the start. No pretense. No waiting for the inevitable disappointment. Ethan looked at the contact card on his phone screen. Marianne Voss. The name sounded strong, competent, like someone who didn't make decisions lightly. He saved the number, not because he planned to call, he wasn't that impulsive, despite the surreal nature of the evening, but because something about Marianne's words had cracked through his resignation. The way she'd called him a good father without qualification, the way she'd seen his daughter as an asset, not a liability, the way she'd been angry on his behalf when Vanessa walked out. Ethan paid his bill and headed out into the December night. Snow had started falling while he was inside, light flakes that melted on contact with the pavement but dusted the cars and trees with white. Christmas lights glowed from storefronts and apartment windows, and somewhere a church bell rang out the hour. His car was cold, breath fogging in the air as he started the engine and waited for the heater to kick in. He should call his sister, she was watching Sophie tonight, would want to know how the date went. But he couldn't face explaining yet, couldn't bear the sympathy in her voice when he admitted it had ended the same way as always. Instead, he drove through quiet streets, taking the long way home. The city looked beautiful under its thin coating of snow, peaceful in a way that belied all the loneliness contained in its buildings. How many people were alone tonight? How many were pretending to be happy at Christmas parties, forcing smiles through heartbreak, playing roles they'd stopped believing in? Ethan thought about Marianne sitting alone at that table, watching her date choose work over her company. He thought about the practiced way she'd described her situation. 15 years of career, 7 years without love. The specific nature of those details suggested she'd thought about them often, measured her life in metrics that proved success while highlighting absence. She was right. They didn't know each other. This whole situation was absurd. But she was also right about something else. The normal way wasn't working. Not for him, not for her, apparently not for a lot of people. Everyone was so busy performing first date and following unspoken rules about revealing deal breakers at the proper time. Meanwhile, life kept moving forward, opportunities kept passing by, and loneliness kept winning. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "How'd it go? Sophie wants to know if she can have ice cream before bed. I said ask Dad." Ethan smiled despite everything. "Tell her nice try, but no. She already had dessert tonight at your place. I know she did." The response came quickly. "Busted. She tried. So? The date? Tell you later. Be home in 20. He didn't have the energy to explain via text. Didn't have the words yet to describe what had happened. How did you tell someone that a stranger had proposed marriage in a restaurant? That something about the absurdity of it had felt more real than any carefully planned date he'd been on in years? When Ethan pulled into his sister's driveway, he could see Sophie through the front window, dancing around the living room in her pajamas, probably hopped up on the sugar Rachel had definitely let her have despite knowing better. His daughter was all wild curls and kinetic energy, joy personified even after everything she'd lost. She was the reason he kept trying, the reason he subjected himself to awkward dates and inevitable rejection. Sophie deserved a full family, not just a tired dad doing his best. She deserved someone who would braid her hair better than his amateur attempts, someone who could navigate girl drama and period talks and all the other things that were coming fast on the horizon. She deserved a mother. But more than that, she deserved someone who wouldn't leave, someone who knew what they were signing up for from day one, someone who saw them as a package deal and chose them anyway. Rachel opened the door as Ethan approached, her expression already sympathetic. She was 2 years older, with the same brown hair and blue eyes, the same tendency to wear her heart on her sleeve. She'd been his rock since Claire died, showing up with casseroles and childcare and refusing to let him drown in grief. "That bad?" she asked, reading his face. She walked out when she saw Sophie's picture. Jesus. Rachel stepped back to let him in, anger flashing in her eyes. What is wrong with people? With me, apparently. Wrong demographic. Too complicated. You're not complicated, you're a father. There's a difference. Rachel grabbed his coat, hung it on the rack with more force than necessary. You know what? Forget her. You deserve someone who sees Sophie as a bonus, not a burden. Sophie came bounding around the corner, slamming into Ethan's legs with the force of a small, enthusiastic truck. Daddy, Aunt Rachel let me stay up late because it's almost Christmas. Did she now? Ethan scooped his daughter up, breathing in the strawberry shampoo scent of her hair. And did Aunt Rachel also let you have ice cream? Sophie's eyes went wide with theatrical innocence. Maybe a little bit. Uh-huh. A little bit like a whole bowl. A medium bit? Rachel laughed from the doorway. She negotiated me down from vegetables to fruit roll-ups. This kid's going to be a lawyer. Ethan carried Sophie to the couch, settling her on his lap. How was your evening, besides the sugar consumption? We watched Frozen again. Aunt Rachel cried at the ending. Again. Sophie giggled, playing with the buttons on his shirt. Did you have fun at your dinner? It was interesting. Did you make a new friend? Ethan hesitated. Sophie knew he sometimes went on grown-up dinners, but not really what they were. She was too young to understand dating, and he'd been careful never to introduce her to anyone unless it got serious, which, given his track record, meant she'd never met anyone at all. Maybe, he said carefully. Sometimes grown-up friendships are complicated. Mom used to say complicated just means you haven't figured it out yet. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, the way it always was when she mentioned Claire. She was too young to hold on to deep grief. It came in waves, sudden and sharp, then retreated back into her normal childhood concerns. Your mom was a smart lady. The smartest, but you're pretty smart too, Daddy. Sophie yawned, resting her head on his shoulder. Are we doing Christmas cookies tomorrow? Definitely, it's tradition. Rachel appeared with Sophie's coat and backpack. I put her inhaler in the front pocket. She didn't need it tonight, but, just in case. They went through the familiar routine of departure, shoes, coat, hugs for Aunt Rachel, promises to see each other at Christmas dinner in 3 days. Sophie chattered the whole drive home about her evening, about the Christmas lights on their street, about how many days until Santa came. By the time Ethan carried her inside and got her settled in bed, she was half asleep, clutching the worn stuffed rabbit that had been a gift from Claire. He sat on the edge of her bed, brushing curls away from her forehead. Daddy? Sophie's voice was drowsy. I wish I had a mom like Emma does. Emma's mom makes fancy lunches and knows all the princess names. The words hit like physical blows, even though Sophie's delivery was sleepy and innocent. I know, sweetheart. I wish you had that too. You make good lunches, but they're not fancy. She yawned again. Maybe we could find you a wife who knows about fancy lunches? Ethan felt his throat tighten. Maybe. But she'd have to be really special, someone who would love you just as much as I do. That's a lot of love. Yeah, Bug, that's a lot of love. He kissed her forehead. Sweet dreams. Love you to the moon. And back again, Sophie mumbled, already drifting off. Ethan left her door cracked open. She still didn't like complete darkness, and headed to his own bedroom. The house felt too quiet, the way it always did after Sophie went to sleep. This was when the loneliness hit hardest, in the empty hours between bedtime and his own sleep, when he had nothing to distract him from the absence of another adult, another voice, another heartbeat sharing his space. He got ready for bed on autopilot, then sat on the edge of the mattress, pulling out his phone. Marianne's contact card stared back at him from the screen. This was crazy. She was crazy. The whole situation was insane. But Sophie's words echoed in his head. Maybe we could find you a wife who knows about fancy lunches. What if he called? What if he actually showed up at that hotel room and had an honest conversation with a stranger who seemed to understand something everyone else missed? What was the worst that could happen? Another rejection? He was already an expert at those. Before he could overthink it, Ethan opened a new text message. This is Ethan, from the restaurant. I'm probably going to regret this, but you're right. We should talk. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? I can meet you somewhere public, somewhere we can actually have a conversation. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people being honest about what they want. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then immediately wanted to unsend it. But it was too late. The message was delivered, those 3 dots appearing almost immediately to show she was typing. Tomorrow works. There's a coffee shop called Moretti's 2 blocks from my hotel. Meet me there at 2 p.m.? And Ethan, you won't regret this. Or if you do, at least it'll be for an interesting reason. Ethan stared at the response, half smiling despite his nervousness. This woman was bold in a way that should have been off-putting, but somehow wasn't. She said what she meant. She didn't play games. After years of careful dating rituals and unspoken rules, Marianne's directness felt almost radical. "See you at 2," he typed back. Then he set his phone aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The smart thing would be to cancel, to stick with conventional dating, keep putting himself out there until eventually someone accepted the package deal of him and Sophie. It might take time, but it would be safer, saner, more normal. But normal hadn't been working. Normal had gotten him rejected 5 times in 8 months. Normal had left him sitting alone in restaurants, defending his daughter's existence, apologizing for circumstances he couldn't change. Maybe it was time to try something different. As Ethan finally drifted toward sleep, his last thought was of Marianne's face as she'd walked away. Defiant and terrified in equal measure, taking a risk that could blow up in her face, but doing it anyway. There was something admirable about that kind of courage, something that made him want to be brave too. Tomorrow, he'd find out if 2 strangers could build something real from honesty and need. Tomorrow, he'd discover if Marianne's crazy proposition was actually the sanest thing either of them had done in years. Tomorrow, everything might change, or it might end in disaster. Either way, at least it wouldn't be boring. Ethan woke the next morning to Sophie jumping on his bed, her curls bouncing with each enthusiastic leap. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, and for a moment, just one brief, disorienting moment, he forgot about the previous night's strange encounter. "Daddy, wake up! We have to make Christmas cookies today! You promised!" Reality crashed back. The restaurant. Vanessa walking out. Marianne's unexpected proposal. The text message he'd sent at midnight that now seemed like temporary insanity brought on by humiliation and loneliness. "I'm up, Bug! I'm up!" Ethan caught Sophie mid-bounce, pulling her into a hug that made her squeal with laughter. "Give me 10 minutes to be human, okay? 10 minutes! I'm counting!" Sophie scrambled off the bed and thundered down the hallway, already shouting a countdown that would definitely not last the full 10 minutes. Ethan grabbed his phone from the nightstand, half hoping the messages from last night had been a dream. But no. There they were. Marianne's number. The coffee shop name. 2 p.m. today. 6 hours from now, he'd be sitting across from a woman who'd proposed marriage to a stranger. The rational part of his brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. The part that had watched his date walk out on him last night whispered that maybe terrible ideas were all he had left. He showered quickly, threw on jeans and a sweater, and headed downstairs to find Sophie had already pulled out every cookie cutter they owned and arranged them on the kitchen counter in elaborate patterns. "I organized them by category," she announced proudly. "Animals, shapes, holiday stuff, and the weird ones we don't know what they are." The weird ones are abstract art, obviously. Ethan started pulling out ingredients: flour, sugar, butter, eggs. They had a rhythm to this, developed over 3 Christmases of just the 2 of them. Claire had been the baker, the one who made everything from scratch with effortless grace. Ethan's attempts were more chaotic, more flour everywhere and slightly burned edges, but Sophie didn't seem to mind. They spent the morning elbow-deep in cookie dough, Christmas music playing from Ethan's phone, Sophie's commentary providing constant entertainment. She talked about school, about her friend Emma's upcoming birthday party, about how she'd asked Santa for a puppy, even though she knew Daddy would say they needed to wait until she was older and more responsible. "Maybe when I'm 8, Sophie said hopefully, pressing a star-shaped cutter into rolled dough. "That's almost a whole year away. That's basically being a grown-up." "Almost basically," Ethan agreed, hiding his smile. "We'll see." "We'll see means maybe yes if I'm really good." "We'll see means we'll see, you little negotiator." They were pulling the second batch from the oven when Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Marianne. "Still on for 2? No judgment if you changed your mind. This is unconventional even by my standards." Sophie leaned over to see who was texting. "Is that work?" "No, just a friend." The lie felt awkward in his mouth. He typed back quickly. "Still on. See you there." "You have weird friends who text during cookie time," Sophie observed, returning her attention to decorating a snowman with alarming amounts of icing. By 1:30, Ethan had dropped Sophie at Rachel's again, endured his sister's curious questions about why he needed afternoon childcare on a Saturday, and was driving toward downtown with sweating palms and a racing heart. This was ridiculous. He was 34 years old, acting like a teenager before prom. Moretti's coffee shop occupied a corner building with large windows and weathered brick walls. The inside was warm and crowded, people escaping the cold, nursing lattes while working on laptops or chatting in small groups. Ethan spotted Marianne immediately, sitting at a table near the back, her dark hair down today instead of pulled up, wearing jeans and a cream sweater that made her look younger, more approachable than she had in last night's severe gray dress. She saw him at the same moment, lifting one hand in acknowledgement. Ethan weaved through tables, his mouth dry, wondering what the hell he was doing here. "You came," Marianne said as he approached, and there was genuine relief in her voice. "I was about 60% sure you'd ghost me." "I'm here." Ethan sat down across from her, grateful for the table between them, something solid and normal. "Though I'm still not entirely sure why." "Because we're both tired of pretending," Marianne offered. "Can I get you coffee? I've been here long enough to know they make a decent cappuccino." "Black coffee is fine. I'll get it." "I've got it." She was already standing, moving toward the counter with the same decisive energy she'd shown last night. Ethan watched her order, wondering what kind of person approached a stranger in a restaurant and proposed marriage. Confident, clearly. Maybe a little reckless. Definitely someone used to going after what she wanted. She returned with 2 coffees, sliding his across the table before settling back into her chair. For a moment, they both just sat there, the absurdity of the situation pressing down like atmospheric pressure. "So," Marianne said finally, her lips quirking into a slight smile. "This is weird, right? We can acknowledge that." Extremely weird. Ethan felt some of the tension ease. "I spent the entire drive here questioning my judgment." "Same. I woke up this morning convinced I'd hallucinated last night out of sheer frustration with my dating life." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "But then I checked my phone and there was your text, and I thought, okay, either we're both crazy or we're both onto something." "Or both." "Or both," she agreed. "Look, I'm going to be direct because I don't know how else to do this. Last night I made an impulsive offer based on about 15 minutes of observation and a lot of accumulated loneliness. Today, in daylight, with actual thinking time, I stand by it. But I need to know what you actually want before we go any further with this conversation." Ethan took a sip of coffee, buying time. What did he want? The question felt too big, too complicated. He wanted Sophie to have a mother. He wanted to not feel like a burden to every woman he met. He wanted to wake up next to someone who chose him, really chose him, complications and all. "I want my daughter to have a family," he said slowly. "A real one. Not just me trying to be both parents. I want her to have someone who shows up to school plays and knows how to braid hair properly and can talk to her about things I won't understand. I want her to have stability." "And what do you want?" Marianne pressed. "Not for Sophie. For you." The question caught him off guard. Nobody asked him that anymore. Everything had been about Sophie for so long that his own needs felt almost theoretical. "I want to stop feeling like I have to apologize for my life," Ethan admitted. "I want someone who sees Sophie as a reason to stay, not a reason to leave. I want—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I want someone to share the weight with. It's heavy, doing this alone. Every decision, every worry, every 3 a.m. nightmare, it's all on me. And I'm tired." Marianne's expression softened. "That's honest. Thank you. Your turn. What do you actually want, besides a husband you met in a restaurant?" "I want a child." The words came out firm, certain. "I've always wanted children, but I kept pushing it off. Finish law school, make associate, make partner, establish myself. Then I woke up at 36 and realized I'd traded time for achievement, and time is the one thing you can't negotiate for more of." She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes intense. "I don't want to do it alone. I don't want to be a single mother by choice, juggling everything, never having backup. I want a partner. Someone who's already proven they can put a child first. Someone who won't panic the first time a kid gets sick or needs help with homework at midnight." You're talking about me like I'm a qualified candidate for a job opening. Aren't you? Marianne challenged. You've been a single parent for 3 years. You've kept your daughter stable and happy through the worst thing that could happen to a child. You haven't given up, haven't checked out. That's not nothing, Ethan. That's exactly the kind of person I want to build a life with. You don't know me, he repeated, but the protest felt weaker this time. I know what matters. I know you love your daughter more than your own comfort. I know you're still wearing your wife's ring around your neck, which means you understand commitment. I know you showed up here today even though this is terrifying. She paused. What else do I need to know right now? We can learn the rest. A woman at the next table laughed loudly at something on her phone, breaking the intensity of the moment. Ethan glanced around the coffee shop. All these normal people, having normal conversations, living normal lives. And here he was, discussing a marriage of convenience with a stranger like they were negotiating a business contract. This is insane, he said, but he was smiling slightly. Completely. Marianne smiled back. But what's the alternative? Keep going on dates that go nowhere? Keep waiting for someone to magically appear who checks every box and doesn't run when reality shows up? Most people would say yes. Take time. Find the right person naturally. Most people aren't 36-year-old attorneys who've watched their entire peer group pair off and start families while they worked 80-hour weeks. Marianne's voice held an edge of bitterness. Most people aren't 34-year-old widowers getting rejected for being good fathers. We're not most people, Ethan. Our circumstances are different. Why shouldn't our solutions be different too? She had a point. A strange, unconventional, slightly terrifying point, but a point nonetheless. Tell me about Sophie, Marianne said, shifting gears. What's she like? Ethan felt himself relax slightly. This, at least, was familiar territory. She's 7 going on 17, smart, funny, stubborn as hell. She loves dinosaurs and hates vegetables, unless you hide them in pasta sauce. She has her mother's curls and her mother's ability to read people. He pulled out his phone, showing Marianne the lock screen photo. She asks about having a mom sometimes. Not often, but enough that it breaks my heart every time. Marianne studied the photo carefully, and Ethan watched her face for signs of the usual reaction: forced enthusiasm, subtle withdrawal, the calculation of what a child would cost in terms of freedom and spontaneity. But Marianne's expression was thoughtful, almost soft. She looks like joy personified, Marianne said quietly. What happened to her mother, if you don't mind talking about it? Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed when Sophie was 3, gone by the time she was 4. Claire fought hard, surgery, chemo, everything they offered, but it was aggressive, already stage 4 when they found it. The old pain stirred, duller now than it had been, but still present. Sophie remembers her, but not as much as I'd like. Memory at that age is fuzzy. Sometimes she'll say something that's pure Claire, and I don't know if it's actually memory or if she's absorbed it from the stories I tell. That must be difficult, keeping someone alive in your daughter's mind while also trying to move forward. Yeah. Ethan was surprised by how much Marianne seemed to understand without him having to explain. Everyone says I should take down her photos, pack away her things, move on. But Sophie needs to know her mother existed, that she was loved. I can't erase Claire just to make new relationships easier. I wouldn't want you to. Marianne's voice was firm. If we did this, if we actually tried to make this work, Claire would be part of it. I'm not interested in pretending your past doesn't exist. Sophie's mother was important. That matters. Something in Ethan's chest loosened slightly. Most women can't handle that. Most women probably aren't looking at this the way I am. I'm not trying to replace anyone or insert myself into an existing perfect family. I'm looking at building something new with someone who already knows how to be a partner and parent. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I don't have illusions about this being a fairy tale, Ethan. I'm talking about something real, practical. 2 adults choosing to build a family together because it makes sense for both of them. That sounds more like a business arrangement than a marriage. Does it? Marianne challenged. Most marriages throughout history were arrangements, partnerships based on practical considerations. This idea that you have to be wildly in love before you commit is actually pretty modern, and frankly, it doesn't seem to be working out great for either of us. She had another point, but still, something in Ethan resisted. What about love? Are we just supposed to live together, raise Sophie, and hope feelings develop eventually? I think respect and shared goals are better foundations than passionate attraction that fades in 6 months. Marianne's voice was steady, logical. But I'm not suggesting we live like roommates either. I'm suggesting we build something real, consciously. Go into it eyes open, expectations clear, willing to put in the work. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have tried something different instead of continuing to fail at the same thing over and over. She met his eyes directly. I'm a good attorney, Ethan. I know how to negotiate. If we did this, I'd want a clear agreement, not a prenup exactly, but an understanding. How we'd handle finances, parenting decisions, what happens if things don't work out. I'd want to protect all of us, especially Sophie. You've really thought about this. I spent all night thinking about it. Barely slept. Marianne smiled wryly. Proposing to strangers in restaurants isn't my usual MO. I needed to make sure I could back it up with something more than impulse. Ethan's coffee had gone lukewarm. Outside the window, people hurried past bundled against the cold, heading toward normal Saturday activities with their normal lives. He thought about going home to Sophie, continuing their routine of just the two of them, explaining again why she couldn't have a mom like Emma did. I need to think about this, he said finally, and Sophie has to be the priority. I can't introduce her to someone who might not stick around. I completely agree. We should take time, get to know each other properly. I'm not suggesting we rush into anything. Marianne pulled out her phone, checking something. I'm here until January 3rd. My case doesn't resume until then. What if we spent this time actually talking? Real conversations, no performance. You can decide if I'm someone you'd want around your daughter. I can figure out if I'm really ready for instant parenthood, or if this is just a panic response to my biological clock. That's 10 days. 10 days is enough time to have honest conversations, more than most people get before they decide to commit. She looked at him seriously. And if at any point you decide this won't work, you can walk away. No hard feelings, no pressure. I'm offering possibility, Ethan, not obligation. He should say no, should thank her for the coffee and leave, go back to conventional dating and conventional rejection. But Sophie's voice echoed in his head. Maybe we could find you a wife who knows about fancy lunches. Okay, Ethan heard himself say. 10 days. We talk, get to know each other, see if this crazy idea has any merit beyond desperation and late-night impulses. Marianne's face lit up with a smile that transformed her entire demeanor from composed attorney to something younger and genuinely hopeful. Yeah? You're willing to try? I'm willing to have conversations. That's not the same as commitment. It's a start. She stuck out her hand across the table. Deal? Ethan shook her hand, and the gesture felt oddly formal and weirdly intimate at the same time. Her grip was firm, confident, warm. Deal, he agreed. But I need to set some ground rules. I'd expect nothing less. Sophie doesn't meet you unless I'm sure this is going somewhere. I won't introduce her to someone who's going to disappear. Agreed, completely. And if we do this, if we actually somehow decide this isn't completely insane, I want a long engagement. Time for all of us to adjust, for Sophie to get comfortable before any legal commitments. Reasonable. What else? Ethan thought for a moment. Honesty. Complete honesty. The second you have doubts, the second you realize this isn't what you want, you tell me. I can handle rejection. What I can't handle is someone pretending for Sophie's sake and then leaving when it gets hard. Something flickered across Marianne's face, pain maybe, or recognition. I can do that. Same goes for you. If you decide I'm not right for Sophie, you tell me directly. They sat there for a moment, the weight of what they'd just agreed to settling between them. Around them, the coffee shop continued its Saturday rhythm, oblivious to the strange negotiation that had just taken place. So, Marianne said, a slight smile playing at her lips, should we start with the basics, favorite color, middle name, that kind of thing? That seems anticlimactic after negotiating marriage terms. I contain multitudes. She leaned back in her chair, more relaxed now. Fine. Something real then. What scares you most about this? The question caught Ethan off guard. That Sophie will get attached and you'll leave. That I'll fail at giving her a family again. That I'm making a huge mistake based on loneliness and desperation. He paused. What scares you? That I'll be terrible at parenting. That I've romanticized what having a family means and the reality will be too hard. That I'll wake up one day and resent the life I chose. Marianne's honesty was stark, unflinching. I'm terrified of screwing up a child who's already been through enough. That's actually a good sign, Ethan said. The worst parents are the ones who think they know everything. Says the man who's been doing it for 3 years. Says the man who Googles how to talk to 7-year-old girls at 2 in the morning when Sophie asks questions I don't know how to answer. He smiled slightly. I'm terrified most of the time. I just try not to let her see it. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easier than it had any right to. Marianne told him about growing up in Chicago, about parents who measured success in courtroom wins and billable hours, about a childhood spent in private schools and summer camps while her parents built their careers. She'd followed their path, law school, corporate firm, partnership track, before realizing at 35 that she'd built exactly the life they wanted and none of what she needed. Ethan told her about meeting Claire in college, about building a life together that felt perfect until cancer shattered everything, about the fog of early grief when he'd barely functioned, when Rachel had essentially moved in to help with Sophie because he couldn't manage bedtime routines and his own breakdown simultaneously. About slowly learning to be enough for his daughter, even when he felt like a poor substitute for the parent she'd lost. You're not a substitute, Marianne said firmly. You're her father. That's not a consolation prize. Try telling that to the women who walk out when they see her picture. Those women are idiots. Marianne's voice held an edge of anger. Anyone who sees a loving father and thinks burden instead of blessing doesn't deserve either of you. It was nearly 4 when Ethan checked his phone and realized he needed to pick up Sophie soon. They'd spent over 2 hours talking, and it hadn't felt forced or awkward. Marianne was sharp, funny, surprisingly easy to talk to once they moved past the weirdness of their situation. I should go, he said reluctantly. Sophie will be vibrating with cookie-induced energy by now. How did the cookies turn out? Edible, mostly. We're not winning any baking competitions, but they're made with love. He stood, pulling on his coat. When should we do this again? Tomorrow? I could come by wherever you're comfortable, another coffee shop, a restaurant, wherever. Marianne stood as well, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Or we could do something different. I'm open to suggestions. An idea formed before Ethan could stop it. There's a winter festival at the park tomorrow afternoon. Ice skating, hot chocolate, that kind of thing. It's very public, very casual. If you wanted to come, he trailed off, suddenly uncertain. I'd like that. Marianne's smile was genuine. Text me the details? Yeah, I will. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, neither quite sure how to end this strange first date that wasn't really a first date. Finally, Marianne stuck out her hand again. Thanks for showing up, for being willing to try something different. Ethan shook her hand, then on impulse pulled her into a brief hug. She stiffened for just a second before relaxing into it, and when they pulled apart, both were smiling self-consciously. See you tomorrow, Ethan said. Tomorrow, Marianne agreed. The drive to Rachel's house felt different somehow, lighter, like a weight had shifted without disappearing entirely. Ethan's mind raced through everything they'd discussed, every agreement they'd made, every shared vulnerability. This was still crazy. Still impulsive and risky and completely unconventional. But maybe crazy was exactly what he needed. Rachel opened the door before he could knock, Sophie already racing toward him with a cookie clutched in each hand and frosting on her face. Daddy, look! Aunt Rachel let me decorate more cookies and I made one that looks like you. Ethan examined the misshapen blob of dough covered in brown icing. That's very artistic. The hair is a little wrong, but I tried. Sophie grabbed his hand, pulling him inside. Come see the rest. I made a whole family of cookies. Rachel caught Ethan's eye over Sophie's head, mouthing, "We need to talk," with an expression that promised interrogation later. Ethan nodded slightly, following his daughter into the kitchen, where an array of decorated cookies covered the counter. This one is me, Sophie explained, pointing to a small figure with wild yellow hair. This one is you with the messy hair. And this one... She held up a taller cookie with carefully drawn features. This one is the mom cookie, because every family needs a mom. Ethan's throat tightened. That's beautiful, Bug. Do you think we'll ever have a real mom cookie? I mean, a real mom for our family? Sophie's voice was casual, but her eyes were serious, searching his face. Maybe, Ethan said carefully. Would you like that? Emma says having a mom is nice because her mom knows how to do braids that don't hurt, and she makes fancy lunches, and she knows all the words to the princess songs. Sophie set down the cookie carefully. You try really hard, Daddy, but you don't know the princess songs. That's true. I'm more of a classic rock guy. Could we maybe find someone who knows princess songs and braids? Sophie looked up at him hopefully. Someone nice who would want to be our family? Ethan crouched down to Sophie's level, brushing a curl away from her forehead. If we found someone like that, would you be okay with it? With having a new person in our family? Sophie considered this seriously. Would she be nice to you? I would make sure of that. And would she want to be here, like really want to, not just pretend? I wouldn't bring anyone into our lives who didn't really want to be here. The promise felt heavy, important. You're my priority, always. Any new person would have to be good for both of us. Okay then. Sophie threw her arms around his neck. I think I would like that. As long as she lets me keep my room the way it is and doesn't make me eat vegetables I don't like. Those are reasonable conditions. Ethan hugged her tight, breathing in the sugar cookie smell of her hair, feeling the weight of the decision he was making. Not just for himself anymore, but for this small person who trusted him completely. After securing Sophie in her car seat and enduring Rachel's pointed "call me later" reminder, Ethan drove home with his daughter, chattering about the festival tomorrow, about whether there would be face painting again this year, about how she wanted to try ice skating even though she'd probably fall down a lot. Falling down is part of learning, Ethan said. The important thing is getting back up. Did you fall down a lot when you were learning things? All the time, still do. But you always get back up? I try my best to. That night, after dinner and bath time and 3 stories because Sophie negotiated hard, Ethan sat in the living room with his phone in his hand. The smart thing would be to cancel tomorrow, to back out before Sophie got involved, before anyone got hurt. But he thought about Marianne's honest answers, her willingness to admit fear, the way she'd talked about Sophie like a person worthy of respect rather than an obstacle to overcome. He opened his messages and typed, Festival is at Morrison Park, starts at 1 p.m. Parking is terrible, so maybe meet there? Fair warning, 7-year-olds at festivals are pure chaos. The response came quickly. I'll be there, and chaos sounds refreshing after corporate law. See you tomorrow. Ethan set down his phone and looked around his living room. Photos of Sophie on every surface, her drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, her toys organized in bins that she'd ignore in favor of spreading everything across the floor. This was his life. Messy, complicated, built from the ruins of loss. Was he really considering letting a stranger into it? But Marianne wasn't quite a stranger anymore. She was a possibility, a chance. A woman who looked at his life and saw something worth choosing rather than something to run from. Tomorrow would tell him more. Tomorrow, he'd see if the connection they'd felt over coffee translated into reality, if the practical discussion of building a family could coexist with actual human warmth. Tomorrow, things would either move forward or fall apart. Ethan pulled out Claire's ring from under his shirt, holding the warm metal in his palm. I'm trying, he whispered to the empty room. I'm trying to give Sophie what she needs. I hope I'm doing this right. The ring offered no answers, but somehow just holding it made him feel less alone. Claire would have found this whole situation absurd, proposing to strangers, negotiating marriage like a business deal. But she also would have understood his desperation to give Sophie a family, his exhaustion at being everything for their daughter alone. He tucked the ring back against his chest and headed upstairs to bed, tomorrow's possibilities and risks swirling through his mind like the snow that had started falling outside his window. Whatever happened next, at least he was trying something different. At least he hadn't given up. The winter festival was already crowded when Ethan and Sophie arrived. The park transformed into a wonderland of lights and laughter. Booths lined the pathways, selling hot chocolate and roasted nuts. Children shrieked with delight on the ice rink, and somewhere a brass band played carols that competed with the general chaos of 100 families celebrating the season. Sophie's hand gripped his tightly, her eyes wide with excitement. "Can we do face painting first? Please, please, please? Let's wait a bit, okay? I'm meeting someone here." Ethan scanned the crowd, nerves jumping in his stomach. In the bright afternoon light, surrounded by families and normalcy, the decision to invite Marianne felt simultaneously right and terrifying. "Meeting who?" Sophie looked up at him curiously. "A friend? Someone I want you to meet. A grown-up friend or a kid friend?" "Grown-up. Her name is Marianne." Ethan crouched down to Sophie's level, suddenly needing her to understand this was important. "She's someone I've been talking to, someone who might spend time with us sometimes. I want you to meet her, see what you think." Sophie's expression turned serious, the way it did when she was processing something big. "Is she nice?" "I think so. But you get to decide too, okay? If you don't like her, we don't have to see her again." "Okay." Sophie seemed satisfied with this arrangement. "But if she's mean to you, I'm going to tell her to leave." Ethan felt his heart squeeze. "Deal. You're my protector." "The fiercest protector." Sophie flexed her small arms in what she clearly thought was an intimidating pose. "Ethan?" He turned to find Marianne approaching through the crowd, dressed in dark jeans and a navy pea coat, a red scarf bright against the winter palette. She looked nervous, her usual composure cracked slightly around the edges, and something about that made Ethan relax fractionally. At least he wasn't the only one terrified. "Hey, you found us!" He stood, feeling Sophie press against his leg, suddenly shy. "Marianne, this is Sophie. Bug, this is my friend Marianne." Marianne didn't crouch down or reach out immediately, which Ethan appreciated. Instead, she stood at a comfortable distance, giving Sophie space to assess her. "Hi, Sophie, your dad's told me a lot about you." Sophie peered out from behind Ethan's leg, curiosity winning over shyness. "Like what?" "Like how you're excellent at negotiating for ice cream and you know more about dinosaurs than most adults." Marianne's smile was gentle, genuine. "And that you make really artistic cookies." "Did he show you pictures?" Sophie emerged slightly, interested now. "Not yet, but I'd love to see them sometime." Sophie studied Marianne with the unsettling intensity only children could manage, taking in everything from her hair to her boots. Ethan held his breath, waiting for his daughter's verdict. Sophie had met precious few of his friends, and none that carried the weight this meeting did. "You have nice hair," Sophie announced finally. "It's shiny." "Thank you. Yours is beautiful. I love the curls." "Daddy tries to brush it, but he's not very good at it." Sophie said this matter-of-factly, without accusation. "Sometimes it hurts." "Hair can be tricky," Marianne agreed. "My mom used to braid mine when I was your age. Took forever, but it kept the tangles away." Sophie's eyes lit up. "You know how to do braids?" "I do. French braids, regular braids, fishtail braids. My mom was very thorough in her teaching. Daddy only knows ponytails, and sometimes they're crooked." Sophie moved fully out from behind Ethan now, warming to this topic. "Could you maybe show him how to do braids that don't hurt?" Marianne glanced at Ethan, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly, giving permission for whatever came next. "I could do that," Marianne said. "If your dad wants to learn, and you want to teach me what works for your hair." "Deal." Sophie stuck out her hand for a shake, mimicking adult behavior she'd clearly picked up from watching Ethan. Marianne shook it solemnly, and Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen just slightly. They spent the next hour wandering through the festival, Sophie leading them from booth to booth with inexhaustible energy. Marianne didn't try too hard, didn't force connection or overwhelm Sophie with attention. Instead, she followed the child's lead, answering questions when asked, offering observations when appropriate, maintaining enough distance to not feel intrusive. At the face painting booth, Sophie agonized over choices before settling on a butterfly design. Marianne sat beside her on the bench, watching the artist work, making occasional comments that made Sophie giggle. Ethan stood back slightly, observing them together, trying to imagine this as their regular life instead of a trial run. "Your daughter's wonderful," a woman next to him commented, nodding toward Sophie and Marianne. "How old?" 7. Almost 8. Ethan smiled automatically. And your wife seems lovely with her. The assumption landed like a punch, even though Ethan should have expected it. Oh, she's not. We're not married. She's a friend. The woman smiled knowingly. Well, they look good together. Natural. Did they? Ethan studied the scene more carefully. Sophie was chattering about something, her hands gesturing wildly as the face painter tried to work around the movement. Marianne listened with apparent genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that kept Sophie talking. There was an ease between them that seemed improbable, given they'd met 20 minutes ago. When the butterfly was complete, Sophie insisted on seeing it immediately, dragging them to the nearest reflective surface, a shop window displaying winter decorations. She studied herself critically, then beamed. I look like a fairy. A fierce fairy, Marianne agreed, the kind that protects enchanted forests. And fights dragons. Obviously, all the best fairies fight dragons. They grabbed hot chocolate next, Sophie getting whipped cream on her nose within seconds of the first sip. Ethan reached to wipe it away, but Marianne was faster, producing a napkin from her pocket with practiced efficiency. Thanks, Sophie said, then returned to her hot chocolate with single-minded focus. She's easy to like, Marianne said quietly to Ethan as Sophie got distracted by a dog walking past. You've done an incredible job with her. Most days I'm just trying not to screw up too badly. That's parenting, from what I understand. Controlled chaos punctuated by moments of terror. Marianne watched Sophie chase after the dog owner to ask if she could pet it. She's confident, happy. Those don't happen by accident in kids who've been through trauma. We've had help, therapy mainly, and my sister Rachel has been a lifesaver. Ethan paused. But it's still hard. I can do a lot of things for her, but I can't be her mother. And lately she's been noticing that gap more. The fancy lunches and princess songs? Marianne's voice held understanding. You remember that? I remember everything you've told me. She said it simply, like it was obvious. Sophie deserves someone who can fill that role. And more importantly, you deserve a partner, someone to share the load. Before Ethan could respond, Sophie came running back, bouncing with excitement. The dog's name is Biscuit, and he's a golden retriever, and he licked my hand. Can we get a dog, Daddy? Please? We've talked about this, Bug. Maybe when you're a little older. But I'm almost 8. That's practically a teenager. That's practically still 7, Ethan countered, fighting a smile. Sophie turned to Marianne with strategic calculation. Do you think I'm old enough for a dog? Marianne didn't miss a beat. I think your dad probably knows best about what your family is ready for. Dogs are a lot of responsibility. Sophie deflated slightly, clearly hoping for an ally. That's what Daddy always says. Sometimes the grown-ups are right. Annoying, but true. Marianne's tone was sympathetic without undermining Ethan. But maybe you could volunteer at an animal shelter. Spend time with dogs there while you're getting older and more responsible? Sophie's face lit up again. Can I, Daddy? Can we do that? Ethan shot Marianne a look that was half amused, half exasperated. That's actually not a bad idea. We can look into it. Yes. Sophie pumped her fist, then grabbed Marianne's hand unselfconsciously. You have good ideas. Come on, we need to go ice skating now. The ice rink was packed, a chaos of wobbling children and patient parents. Ethan rented skates for himself and Sophie, then turned to Marianne questioningly. I haven't skated in years, she admitted. I'll probably fall on my face. Falling down is part of learning, Sophie announced sagely, parroting Ethan's words from the night before. The important thing is getting back up. That's wise advice. Marianne rented skates, and they made their awkward way to the ice. Sophie, predictably, had more confidence than skill. She pushed off aggressively, immediately lost her balance, and went down hard on her padded rear. Instead of crying, she laughed and struggled back to her feet, determined to try again. Ethan stayed close, ready to catch her when she inevitably fell, while Marianne moved more cautiously along the edge. For a while they existed in their separate orbits, Ethan and Sophie making slow, chaotic progress around the rink, Marianne finding her balance at her own pace. Then Sophie noticed Marianne struggling and with the fearlessness of children, skated over to help. You have to push like this, Sophie demonstrated, her technique questionable but her confidence absolute. And don't look at your feet. Look where you're going. That's excellent advice. Marianne accepted Sophie's offered hand, and together they made a wobbly circuit of the rink, while Ethan followed behind, watching his daughter try to teach a grown woman something she'd only learned herself an hour ago. They fell together once, a tangle of limbs and laughter that had Sophie shrieking with delight and Marianne grinning despite the cold seeping through her jeans. Ethan helped them both up, and for a moment the three of them stood there on the ice, connected by held hands and shared ridiculousness, and something in Ethan's chest cracked open with unexpected hope. This could be his life. This chaos, this laughter, this feeling of family. The moment shattered when his phone rang. He pulled it out awkwardly, trying to maintain balance while checking the screen. Rachel. "I should take this," he said apologetically. "My sister, she doesn't usually call unless something's up." "Go ahead. We'll keep practicing." Marianne steadied Sophie, who immediately started showing off her improved skating skills. Ethan made his way to the edge of the rink, stepping off the ice to answer. "Hey, Rach, what's—" "Don't panic, but I need you to listen carefully." Rachel's voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant she was absolutely panicking. "Mom called. She and Dad are in town. They want to meet you for dinner tonight. They specifically said they want to meet Sophie." Ethan's blood went cold. His parents. The ones who'd made their disappointment in his choices abundantly clear, who'd attended Claire's funeral with tight lips and tighter judgment, who sent birthday cards to Sophie with checks inside but never visited, never called, never showed any real interest in their granddaughter's life. Tonight, they just decided to come to town and expect us to be available. Apparently Dad has a conference here tomorrow, and Mom thought it would be nice to see you. Rachel's tone suggested she found this explanation as suspicious as Ethan did. They're staying at the Regency downtown, 7 p.m. in the hotel restaurant. "I'm not doing this, Rach. Not tonight. Not with no warning." Ethan watched Sophie on the ice, laughing as Marianne helped her practice stopping. "Sophie's having a good day. I'm not going to ruin it with their judgment." "I told them you might not be available. But Ethan—" Rachel paused. "They mentioned something about wanting to discuss Sophie's future. Mom used the word concerned about 3 times. The implied threat landed like a fist to the gut. His parents had money, connections, and long-held opinions about Ethan's ability to parent alone. They'd never explicitly suggested taking Sophie, but the specter of it had hung over every interaction since Claire died. They can't just— Ethan stopped himself, aware he was in public, aware Sophie could skate over at any moment. "I'll call you back. Give me 10 minutes. He hung up and stood there, fury and fear warring in his chest. His parents, showing up unannounced, making demands, using words like concerned and future like weapons. After 3 years of phone calls on holidays and checks and cards, now they wanted to be involved. Ethan? Marianne had skated over, Sophie occupied with another child she'd befriended. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My parents. They're in town, want dinner tonight. They never visit, never call, but now suddenly they're concerned about Sophie's future." The words came out bitter. "My sister thinks they're going to try something, make some move about custody or my fitness as a parent." Marianne's expression hardened. "Can they do that? Legally?" "They have money and lawyers and a history of getting what they want." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "I've been waiting for this since Claire died, waiting for them to decide I wasn't good enough to raise their granddaughter alone." "Then don't go alone." The words were immediate, decisive. "Take me with you." Ethan stared at her. "What?" "Take me to dinner. Introduce me as your—" She hesitated fractionally. "Your girlfriend. Your serious girlfriend who's involved in Sophie's life. Show them you're not alone, that you're building something stable." Marianne's eyes were fierce. "I'm an attorney. I know how these games work. They want to intimidate you, make you feel inadequate. Don't give them the satisfaction." "Marianne, you don't have to—" "I want to." She gripped his arm, intense and focused. "This is exactly what I meant about partnership. You shouldn't have to face this alone. Let me help." Sophie skated over, sensing the shift in mood. "Are we done skating?" Ethan looked at his daughter, happy, trusting, completely unaware that her future might be under threat. He thought about walking into that restaurant alone, facing his parents' judgment, their subtle implications that he wasn't enough. Then he looked at Marianne, this woman who'd inserted herself into his life with reckless honesty, who was offering to walk into an ambush with him for no reason except that he needed backup. "Yeah, Bug, we're done." He made a decision, the words coming out before he could second-guess them. "We need to go home and get cleaned up. We're having dinner with Grandma and Grandpa tonight." Sophie's face fell. "The ones who never visit?" "Those ones." "Do I have to go?" Sophie's voice was small, anxious in a way that broke Ethan's heart. She'd only met his parents a handful of times, and each encounter had left her quiet and withdrawn for days. "Yeah, sweetheart. But Marianne's coming too." He glanced at Marianne, who nodded firmly. "So it won't just be us." Sophie looked between them, then grabbed Marianne's hand. "Will you sit next to me?" "Absolutely." Marianne squeezed Sophie's hand. "And if dinner gets boring, we can make a game of counting how many times they say something stuffy and grown up." Despite his anxiety, Ethan felt gratitude wash over him. This woman, this stranger, becoming something more, was stepping into the breach without hesitation. They returned the skates and headed to the parking lot, Sophie chattering nervously about whether Grandma and Grandpa would like her butterfly face paint, whether she should change clothes, whether they'd brought her a present since it was almost Christmas. Ethan drove home in a fog of dread, Marianne following in her rental car. The afternoon's ease had evaporated, replaced by the familiar weight of his parents' expectations and disappointment. He'd spent his whole life trying to measure up to their standards. The right schools, the right career, the right choices. Marrying Claire, who came from a middle-class family and worked as a teacher, had been his first major rebellion. Having Sophie had been a joy they'd accepted with resignation. And raising her alone after Claire's death had confirmed every doubt they'd ever voiced about his judgment. At home, Ethan helped Sophie wash her face and change into a dress she deemed appropriate for grandparents. She stood in front of her mirror, anxious and small in a way that made him want to cancel everything and keep her safe from his parents' cold assessment. "You look beautiful, Bug." "What if they don't like me?" Sophie's voice was tiny. Ethan crouched down, taking her hands. "Then that's their loss, not yours. You're smart and kind and funny and brave. If they can't see that, it says something about them, not you." "Promise you won't let them take me away?" The question came out whispered, terrified, and Ethan realized Sophie had picked up more than he'd thought from overheard phone calls and adult conversations. "Never. I promise you, Sophie. You're mine and I'm yours, and nobody changes that." He pulled her into a fierce hug. "I will always fight for you, always." When they came downstairs, Marianne was waiting in the living room, changed into a black dress and heels that somehow made her look both professional and formidable. She'd pulled her hair back into a sleek bun, put on makeup that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and intelligent eyes. She looked like someone who won cases for a living, someone who didn't back down. "Ready?" she asked, her voice gentle despite her armor. "As we'll ever be." Ethan grabbed his coat, his keys, his courage. The drive downtown was tense. Sophie sat in the back, unusually quiet, while Ethan gripped the steering wheel and tried to prepare for whatever ambush his parents had planned. Marianne followed in her car, a solid presence that made the whole situation feel slightly less impossible. The Regency Hotel was exactly the kind of place his parents preferred. Expensive, understated, designed to remind you of your place in the social hierarchy. Ethan held Sophie's hand as they walked through the lobby, Marianne on his other side, the three of them a united front against whatever came next. His parents were already seated in the restaurant, his father in a perfectly tailored suit despite the Sunday evening hour, his mother wearing pearls and judgment in equal measure. They stood as Ethan approached, their expressions flickering with surprise at Marianne's presence. "Ethan?" His father's voice was measured, controlled. "We weren't expecting a fourth." "This is Marianne Voss. My girlfriend." The lie came out smoothly, necessarily. "Marianne, these are my parents, Richard and Catherine Cole." Marianne extended her hand, her smile professional and cool. "Pleasure to meet you both. Ethan's told me so much about you." The handshakes were brief, his mother's eyes already assessing Marianne's dress, her bearing, her credentials. "Voss? Any relation to the Chicago Voss family, the attorneys?" My parents? Marianne's tone gave nothing away. I'm a corporate attorney with Morrison and Wright. Something shifted in his mother's expression. Calculation. Recognition. Morrison and Wright was prestigious, powerful. Marianne had just established herself as someone who belonged in their world, someone who couldn't be easily dismissed. And Sophie? His mother's attention turned to his daughter, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. My goodness, you've grown. Come give Grandma a hug. Sophie pressed against Ethan's leg, reluctant. He could feel her trembling slightly, and rage burned in his chest that his own parents inspired fear instead of love in their granddaughter. She's shy with people she doesn't see often, Ethan said, keeping his voice level. Maybe we should sit down, let her warm up. They took their seats, Sophie wedged firmly between Ethan and Marianne, creating a buffer zone. Menus appeared, orders were taken with painful politeness, and then his father leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. I'll be direct, Ethan. We're concerned about Sophie's upbringing. A child needs stability, proper role models, educational opportunities. She has all of those things. Ethan's voice was tight. She's thriving in school. She's in therapy to process her mother's death. She's happy and healthy. She's being raised by a single father who works full-time. His mother's tone implied this was self-evidently inadequate. We think it might be time to consider alternatives that would give her more structure. The threat hung there, barely veiled. Ethan felt Sophie's hand grip his under the table, and he squeezed back reassuringly. Sophie has plenty of structure. Marianne's voice cut through the tension, calm and sharp. She has a father who prioritizes her above everything, a strong support system, and a stable home environment. What exactly are you suggesting is lacking? His mother's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not sure this concerns you, dear. This is a family matter. I'm part of this family now. Marianne's smile didn't waver. Ethan and I have been together for several months. I'm very involved in Sophie's life, so it absolutely concerns me. The lie expanded, grew weight. Several months, involved in Sophie's life. They were building a fiction in real time, and Ethan felt simultaneously grateful and guilty that Marianne was willing to perjure herself for him. I see. His father studied Marianne with new interest. And what are your intentions with my son, with my granddaughter? My intentions are to build a life with them. Marianne met his stare without flinching. Ethan is an exceptional father and a good man. Sophie is a remarkable child. I consider myself very fortunate to be part of their lives. Sophie had been silent through this exchange, but now she spoke up, her small voice cutting through the adult posturing. Marianne teaches Daddy how to do braids that don't hurt, and she knows about dogs, and she likes my cookies. The innocence of it, the simple child logic of what mattered, shifted something in the atmosphere. His mother's expression softened fractionally, though calculation still lurked behind it. That's nice, sweetheart. She reached across the table toward Sophie, who flinched back slightly. We only want what's best for you. You understand that, don't you? Daddy knows what's best for me. Sophie's voice was firm, defensive. He takes care of me every day. Of course he does, but we're not having this conversation. Ethan cut his mother off, his patience snapping. You don't get to show up after 3 years of phone calls and birthday checks and question my parenting. You don't get to imply you might take my daughter because you've decided I'm not adequate. Ethan, calm down. His father's voice held warning. We're simply concerned. No, you're simply controlling. You've always been. And I'm done apologizing for not living the life you planned for me. Ethan stood, pulling Sophie up with him. We're leaving. Sit down. His father's tone was ice. Running away won't change the facts. A child needs both parents. Without a mother. She has me. That's enough. Ethan was shaking now, fury and fear coursing through him. And she has Marianne and my sister and people who actually love her instead of seeing her as a project to manage. You're being irrational. I'm being a father. Ethan grabbed his coat. Come on, Sophie, we're done here. But Marianne hadn't stood. She remained seated, her expression cool and focused. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every courtroom she'd ever commanded. Let me make something very clear, Mr. and Mrs. Cole. If you attempt any legal action regarding custody or visitation, You will lose. I've spent 15 years in family and corporate law, and I know exactly how these cases unfold. A stable, loving single parent with a strong support system, no history of neglect or abuse, and a child who is demonstrably thriving? No judge will remove Sophie from that situation. She leaned forward slightly, her smile sharp. And if you try, I will personally represent Ethan pro bono, and I will make it my mission to ensure you not only lose, but that the attempt damages your reputation. I'm very good at what I do, and I don't lose often. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan's parents stared at Marianne like she'd grown a second head, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged so directly. Sophie pressed against Ethan's side, her eyes wide. Furthermore, Marianne continued, if you actually care about your granddaughter, if this is truly about her welfare and not about control, you'll recognize that what she needs is your support, not your interference. You'll call more than twice a year. You'll visit without making demands. You'll be grandparents instead of critics. She stood now, her heightened heels making her nearly eye level with Ethan's father. The choice is yours. Be part of Sophie's life in a meaningful, positive way, or stay distant and stop pretending you have a say in how she's raised. But don't threaten this family again. It won't end well for you. Then she turned to Ethan and Sophie, her expression softening completely. Shall we go? I think we've had enough fancy dining for one evening. Ethan could only nod, too stunned and grateful to form words. They walked out of the restaurant together, leaving his parents sitting in shocked silence, their power move turned back on them by a woman they'd tried to dismiss. In the parking lot, as soon as they were out of view, Ethan stopped and turned to Marianne. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Her voice was fierce. Nobody threatens your daughter. Nobody. Sophie was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, and Ethan picked her up, even though she was getting too big for it, holding her while she shook. It's okay, Bug. It's okay. They can't do anything. Marianne made sure of that. I was scared, Sophie whispered against his neck. They were so mean. I know. I'm sorry. Ethan looked at Marianne over Sophie's head, this woman who'd transformed from stranger to defender in the space of 3 days. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Marianne's hand found his shoulder, a solid presence. That's what partners do. They protect each other. The word landed between them, heavy with meaning. Partners. Not strangers playing pretend, but people who showed up when things got hard. Sophie lifted her head from Ethan's shoulder, looking at Marianne with new eyes. Are you really Daddy's girlfriend? The question hung there, and Ethan held his breath. They'd lied to his parents, built a fiction to protect themselves. Now Sophie was asking for the truth. I'm someone who cares about both of you very much, Marianne said carefully. Your dad and I are still figuring out exactly what that means, but I meant what I said in there. I'm not going anywhere. Sophie studied her seriously, then nodded. Okay. Can we go home now? I'm tired. Yeah, Bug. Let's go home. They drove back in a convoy, Marianne following them through dark streets back to the house that suddenly felt like a fortress instead of just a building. Ethan carried a half-asleep Sophie inside, got her changed into pajamas through her drowsy protests, tucked her into bed with her worn rabbit, and a kiss goodnight. Daddy? Sophie's voice was small in the darkness. Is Marianne going to stay? Do you want her to? She's brave, and she was nice to me even when Grandma and Grandpa were scary. Sophie's eyes were already closing. I think we should keep her. Ethan smiled despite everything. We'll see, Bug. Sleep now. We'll see means maybe yes, Sophie mumbled, already drifting off. Downstairs, Marianne was standing in the living room, looking at the photos scattered across every surface. Sophie at various ages, some including Claire, all capturing moments of a life rebuilt from grief. She's out? Marianne asked as Ethan descended the stairs. For now, though she might have nightmares tonight. My parents have that effect. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion catching up with him. I can't believe you did that. You eviscerated them. They deserved it. Marianne's voice was sharp. Using a child as a power play, showing up with threats disguised as concern. That's not grandparenting, that's manipulation. Welcome to my family. Ethan attempted a smile that didn't quite land. Now you understand why I don't see them often. I understand why you're an incredible father despite them, not because of them. Marianne moved closer, her expression softening. You protected Sophie tonight. You stood up to them even though they terrify you. They don't terrify me. Ethan, I'm an attorney. I read people for a living. They absolutely terrify you, and you face them anyway. That's courage. He sank onto the couch, suddenly boneless with relief and delayed fear. They could still try something. Money buys a lot of legal pressure. Let them try. Marianne sat beside him, close but not touching. I wasn't bluffing about representing you. I meant every word. You barely know us. Why would you risk your reputation on this? Because it's the right thing to do. Because that little girl upstairs deserves to stay with her father. Because, Marianne paused, choosing words carefully. Because I meant what I said about partnership. This is what it looks like, showing up when things get hard, standing together against whatever comes. Ethan looked at her, this fierce, brilliant woman who'd crashed into his life 3 days ago with an impossible proposal and was now defending his family like she'd been part of it for years. I think I'm starting to believe this might actually work, he said quietly. This crazy idea of ours. Yeah? Marianne's smile was tentative, hopeful. Even after that disaster of a dinner? Especially after that dinner. You saw the worst of my family and didn't run. Most people would have run. I'm not most people. She said it simply, factually. And neither are you. We're two people who are done pretending, done accepting less than we deserve. Maybe that's enough to build something real. They sat there in the quiet living room, the weight of the evening settling around them like snow. Outside, the world continued its normal rhythm, cars passing, neighbors turning off lights, the ordinary machinery of other people's ordinary lives. But inside this house, something had shifted, something that felt less like a business arrangement and more like the beginning of actual family. Ethan thought about his parents, about their cold calculation and implied threats. He thought about Sophie asking if Marianne would stay, about the way his daughter had gripped Marianne's hand at dinner, seeking protection from people who should have offered love. He thought about the next 10 days, about whether they'd be enough to turn possibility into commitment. And looking at Marianne, exhausted but fierce, still in her armor of heels and sharp dress, having just gone to war for a child she'd met that afternoon, Ethan thought maybe they already had. The next 5 days blurred together in a rhythm that felt both surreal and natural. Marianne showed up each morning with coffee and bagels, settling into Ethan's kitchen like she'd always belonged there. She worked remotely on her case while Sophie was at school, spreading legal documents across the dining room table, occasionally asking Ethan's opinion on arguments even though he understood maybe half of what she was talking about. When Sophie came home each afternoon, Marianne closed her laptop without hesitation, giving the child her full attention. They baked cookies that actually turned out well, built elaborate blanket forts in the living room, watched animated movies while eating popcorn. Slowly, carefully, Marianne was weaving herself into the fabric of their lives. But something was shifting in Ethan too, something he hadn't anticipated. He'd expected this to feel transactional, practical. Instead, he found himself noticing the way Marianne laughed at Sophie's jokes, the patient way she explained things, how she'd started keeping hair ties on her wrist because Sophie's ponytails never stayed put. He noticed the way his house felt less empty with her in it, the way coming home from work meant walking into conversation instead of silence. He was starting to care about her, really care, and that terrified him. On the 6th day, Rachel showed up unannounced, letting herself in with the key Ethan had given her years ago. She found all 3 of them in the kitchen, Ethan cooking dinner while Marianne helped Sophie with math homework at the table, the scene so domestic it could have been staged. "Well," Rachel said from the doorway, making them all jump. "This is cozy." Sophie launched herself at her aunt. "Aunt Rachel! Marianne's teaching me multiplication tricks. Did you know if you use your fingers you can do the 9 times table really easy?" "I did know that, actually." Rachel hugged Sophie, but her eyes were on Ethan, questions written all over her face. "Marianne, right? We met briefly at the festival." "Good memory." Marianne stood, offering her hand. "You're the sister who's been holding this family together. Ethan talks about you constantly." "Does he now?" Rachel shook her hand, assessment clear in her expression. Sophie, honey, why don't you go play in your room for a bit? I need to talk to the grown-ups. But my homework will still be there in 10 minutes. Go on, Bug. Sophie recognized the tone of adult business and reluctantly headed upstairs, leaving the three of them in weighted silence. Ethan continued stirring pasta sauce, not looking at his sister, knowing what was coming. So, Rachel said, pulling out a chair and sitting down like she was settling in for interrogation. Someone want to explain what's actually happening here? Because last week Ethan was getting rejected on blind dates, and now there's a strange woman living in his house teaching his daughter multiplication. I'm not living here, Marianne clarified. I'm still at the hotel. I just spend most of my time here. Right. Much better. Rachel's tone was dry. Ethan, you want to feel this one? Ethan set down his spoon, finally turning to face his sister. It's complicated. I gathered that from the fact that you told Mom and Dad she's your girlfriend of several months when you'd literally just met her. You heard about that dinner? Mom called me. She was very concerned about your sudden relationship and whether this woman was after your money. Rachel snorted. I told her you don't have any money worth chasing, but she wasn't reassured. Marianne's lips twitched slightly. I assure you I have my own money. I believe you. You carry yourself like someone who wins arguments for a living. Rachel leaned forward. What I don't believe is that this is a normal relationship. So what is it actually? Some kind of arrangement? Are you paying her to play house? Jesus, Rachel, no. Ethan felt heat rise in his face. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Because I love you, but I'm not going to watch you make terrible decisions that hurt Sophie. She's already getting attached. She talks about Marianne constantly. What happens when this woman goes back to Chicago and Sophie loses another person she cares about? The accusation hit like a slap, mostly because it voiced every fear Ethan had been trying to ignore. He looked at Marianne, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. I'm not going to hurt Sophie, Marianne said quietly. That's the last thing I want. But you are going back to Chicago. Rachel's voice gentled slightly. That's where your life is. Your job, your home. This has an expiration date, and my niece doesn't understand that. Rachel, Ethan started, but Marianne interrupted. You're right. About everything. She stood, gathering her things with controlled movements. I should go. Give you two space to talk. Marianne, wait. But she was already heading for the door, her composure cracking just enough for Ethan to see hurt underneath. The door closed behind her, and Ethan rounded on his sister. What the hell, Rachel? What the hell yourself? You let a complete stranger into Sophie's life without talking to me, without thinking through what happens when she leaves. Rachel's voice rose. You're so desperate for Sophie to have a mother figure that you're not seeing clearly. This woman, she seems nice, but you don't know her. Not really. And Sophie is already calling her by name, holding her hand, trusting her. What happens in 4 days when Marianne goes back to her real life? I don't know. The admission burst out of Ethan, raw and scared. I don't know, okay? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is the best decision or the worst one. But for the first time in 3 years, Sophie is happy. Really happy. She's asking about the future like she believes good things can happen. And I'm not drowning anymore, Rach. For the first time since Claire died, I feel like I can breathe. His sister's expression softened. Ethan, she showed up out of nowhere and offered exactly what we needed. A partner. Someone who sees Sophie as a blessing instead of a burden. Someone who stood up to Mom and Dad and made them back down. Ethan's voice cracked. And yeah, maybe it's crazy. Maybe I'm making a huge mistake. But I'm tired of being scared, tired of playing it safe and ending up alone anyway. Rachel pulled him into a hug, and Ethan let himself lean into his sister's familiar comfort. I just don't want you hurt again. Either of you. I know, but hurt is part of life. Hiding from it doesn't make it go away. He pulled back, wiping his eyes roughly. I need to go after her, talk to her. Yeah, you do. Rachel squeezed his shoulder. And when you come back, we're having a real conversation about how this is going to work long term. But Ethan, for what it's worth, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her. Not even Claire. The observation stunned him. That's not... It is. With Claire, you were young and in love and building a life. This is different. This is two people who've been broken choosing each other anyway. There's something powerful in that. She pushed him toward the door. Now go. Sophie and I will handle dinner. Ethan grabbed his coat and keys, his heart hammering as he drove toward the Regency Hotel. Night had fallen fully now, the city lit up with Christmas decorations that seemed to mock the chaos in his chest. He'd been so focused on whether Marianne was right for Sophie that he hadn't examined what she was becoming to him. Someone who made him laugh. Someone he looked forward to seeing every morning. Someone whose absence left a hole in his day that had nothing to do with parenting support and everything to do with wanting her presence specifically. He was falling for her. Maybe had already fallen. The realization was terrifying. At the hotel, he talked his way past the desk clerk with enough desperation that she took pity and called Marianne's room. The phone rang 4 times before Marianne answered, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm downstairs," Ethan said without preamble. "Can we talk?" "Please." A long pause, then, "Room 412, give me 5 minutes." He took the elevator up, counting heartbeats, rehearsing and discarding a dozen different speeches. When Marianne opened the door, she'd changed into yoga pants and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, makeup gone. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and Ethan's chest ached with wanting to make this right. "Come in." She stepped aside and he entered the hotel room that had been her home for 10 days. Legal documents covered the desk, her laptop open to what looked like a brief. A suitcase stood in the corner, half-packed. His stomach dropped. "You're leaving early." "I called my office, asked them to push up my return." Marianne wouldn't meet his eyes. "Your sister is right. I'm inserting myself into your lives without thinking about the consequences. Sophie is getting attached, and when I leave, what if you didn't leave?" The words came out before Ethan could stop them. Marianne finally looked at him. "What? What if you didn't go back to Chicago? What if you stayed?" He was improvising wildly now, no plan, just desperate hope. "You said you could work remotely. You said you wanted this, a family, a partner, someone to build a life with. We have that. We're building it. Why does it have to end?" "Because this isn't real, Ethan." Marianne's voice was strained. "We met a week ago. It's pretend. We're playing house because we're both lonely and scared, but that's not the same as actual love, actual commitment. Isn't it?" He moved closer, needing her to hear this. "You've shown up every day. You've been patient with Sophie. You've defended us against my parents. You've fit into our lives like you were always meant to be there. That's not pretend, that's real. It's a trial period, an experiment." But her voice wavered. "We agreed, 10 days to see if this could work. It's been 10 days. We should be honest about what we've learned." "Fine. Honesty." Ethan's heart was hammering. "I've learned that I look forward to seeing you every morning, that your laugh makes everything seem more manageable, that Sophie lights up when you walk in the room, and so do I. I've learned that this week has been the best week I've had in 3 years, and the thought of you leaving feels like losing something I didn't know I needed until I had it." Marianne's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Don't make this harder." "Why are you running?" The question came out soft but pointed. "You're the one who proposed to a stranger in a restaurant. You're the one who said we should stop pretending and be honest about what we want. What do you want, Marianne? Really?" "I want..." She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. "I want to stay so badly it terrifies me. I want to wake up in that house every morning, make breakfast with you, help Sophie with homework, build something real. But I'm so scared, Ethan. What if I'm terrible at this? What if I fail Sophie? What if 6 months from now you realize you made a mistake and I've upended my entire life for something that wasn't meant to last? What if you're amazing at this? What if 6 months from now we can't imagine life without you?" He caught her hands, pulling them gently away from her face. "What if we're both so scared of failing that we sabotage the best thing that's ever happened to either of us? Your sister thinks I'm taking advantage of your desperation. My sister is protective. She'll come around when she sees this is real." He squeezed her hands. "But you have to stay for it to be real. You have to take the risk with me." Marianne looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, searching for something. What are we doing, Ethan? Define this for me. Are we business partners raising a child together? Are we friends playing at family? What is this becoming? The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Ethan thought about the past 10 days, about every moment that had felt like more than convenience. The way Marianne hummed while cooking, the way she'd memorized Sophie's favorite foods, the way she'd started wearing less makeup around them like she was comfortable being seen. The way his heart jumped when she smiled at him. The way he'd caught himself staring at her profile while she read to Sophie. The way he'd started thinking in terms of we instead of I. I think it's becoming something I didn't plan for, he admitted. Something that scares me because I didn't think I could feel this way again. Feel what way? Her voice was barely a whisper. Like I'm falling for you. The confession hung in the air between them, naked and terrifying. Not because you're convenient or because Sophie needs a mother, because you're sharp and funny and fierce, because you call me on my bullshit and stand up for us like we're worth fighting for, because being around you makes me want to be braver, better. Marianne's tears spilled over. I don't know how to do this. I've spent 15 years avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability. Neither do I. I haven't dated anyone seriously since Claire died because everyone made me feel like I had to choose. Be a good father or pursue a relationship. You're the first person who made me think maybe I could have both. He brushed away her tears with his thumb. Stay, please. Not because we have a plan or a contract or any idea what we're doing. Stay because you want to, because this feels right even though it's terrifying. What about my job? My apartment in Chicago? I can't just abandon everything on impulse. Sublease the apartment, transfer to a local office, or go fully remote. People do it all the time. He was bargaining now, negotiating their future like it was something that could be reasoned into existence. Morrison and Wright has an office here. I looked it up. Request a transfer. Or quit and find something else. You're brilliant, Marianne. You'll have options. You looked up my firm's local office? I've been thinking about this for days. How to make it work if you wanted to stay. He pulled her closer. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I also know that I don't want you to leave. Not in 4 days. Not ever. Marianne laughed through her tears, the sound slightly hysterical. We're insane. Both of us. This violates every rule of reasonable decision-making. Reasonable hasn't been working out great for either of us. That's a terrible argument. But you're considering it. He could see it in her eyes. Hope warring with fear, want battling with logic. She pulled her hands free, walking to the window to stare out at the city lights. Ethan waited, barely breathing, while she processed whatever internal debate was raging in her mind. Finally, she turned back to him. If I stay, if I actually do this, I need promises. Real ones. Her voice was steady now, lawyer mode engaged. I need to know that if it doesn't work, we'll handle it like adults, that Sophie won't be caught in the middle, that we'll put her first even if we're miserable. Agreed. Completely. I need time to adjust, to figure out how to be a parent when I've never done it before. I need you to be patient when I screw up, because I will screw up. I screw up daily. We'll figure it out together. And I need, she hesitated, vulnerability creeping back in. I need to know this isn't just about convenience, that you actually care about me, not just what I can provide for your family. Ethan crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. I care about you so much it terrifies me. You're not a convenient solution, Marianne. You're someone I want to know everything about, someone I want to wake up next to, someone I want to build a life with, not because it's practical, but because the alternative, living without you, sounds unbearable. She kissed him then, sudden and fierce, and Ethan felt the world tilt sideways. This was nothing like the careful, respectful distance they'd maintained all week. This was real, messy, and desperate, and full of all the feelings they'd been trying to keep practical. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Marianne rested her forehead against his. I'll need to go back to Chicago to settle things. Give notice, pack up my apartment, tie up loose ends. Her voice was shaky but determined. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 at most. I'll wait. We'll wait. Relief flooded through him so intensely it made him dizzy. Just promise you're coming back. I'm coming back. She pulled away enough to meet his eyes. But Ethan, we need to do this right. No more lying to people about how long we've been together. No more pretending this is something it's not. We tell Sophie the truth, that we met recently, that we're figuring this out together, that there are no guarantees, but we're trying. She deserves honesty, he agreed, even if the truth is we're making this up as we go. Especially then. Marianne's smile was tentative, hopeful. We should tell her together? Tomorrow? Tomorrow. He kissed her again, softer this time, and felt possibility bloom in his chest where fear had been. Stay tonight. Come back to the house. Let's not waste any of the time we have left before you leave. Are you sure? Your sister is there and she already thinks I'm corrupting you. Rachel will deal, and you're not corrupting me. You're saving me. They drove back to the house together, Marianne's overnight bag in Ethan's back seat, both of them giddy with relief and nerves. When they walked in, Rachel was reading to Sophie on the couch, but she looked up as they entered, taking in their joined hands and matching expressions. Well, Rachel said, closing the book, I'm guessing you two worked things out. Marianne's staying. Ethan couldn't keep the joy out of his voice. Not permanently yet, but she's coming back. We're going to try this for real. Sophie launched herself off the couch. Really? You're staying? I need to go back to Chicago for a couple weeks to handle some things, but then yes, I'm coming back. Marianne crouched down to Sophie's level. If that's okay with you. It's very okay. Sophie threw her arms around Marianne's neck. Can you teach me more braids? And can we get a dog? And can you... Slow down, Bug. Ethan gently extracted his daughter. One thing at a time. Right now it's bedtime. But this is important. Bedtime is also important. Come on, I'll tuck you in. Will Marianne be here in the morning? They all looked at each other, navigating this new territory together. Finally, Marianne answered, If your dad says it's okay, then yes. Sophie turned pleading eyes on Ethan, and he felt Rachel's gaze as well, assessing his judgment. This was a line they hadn't crossed yet. Marianne sleeping over, spending the night under the same roof as Sophie, making this official in the way that children understood. Yeah, he said, feeling the weight of the decision. She'll be here in the morning. After Sophie was settled in bed, a process that took longer than usual because she kept coming up with reasons to delay, mostly involving questions about Marianne's plans, Ethan came back downstairs to find Rachel and Marianne in what appeared to be an intense conversation in the kitchen. I'm just saying, Rachel was saying, if you hurt either of them, I will make your life very difficult. I don't care how good a lawyer you are. I wouldn't expect anything less. Marianne's voice was serious. If I thought I was going to hurt them, I wouldn't stay. But you don't know. Nobody knows how this will turn out. No, I don't. But I know I'm going to try as hard as I can to make it work. I know Sophie matters to me. And your brother... Marianne paused. Your brother is one of the best men I've ever met. I'm not going to take that lightly. Rachel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but I'm watching. And if you break his heart, you'll answer to me. Fair enough? Marianne extended her hand. Truce? Truce. Rachel shook it, then pulled Marianne into an unexpected hug. Welcome to the family, I guess. We're a mess, but we're loyal. I'm counting on it. After Rachel left, Ethan and Marianne sat together on the couch, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day. Ethan had given her one of his t-shirts to sleep in, and seeing her in his clothes, in his house, felt both surreal and perfectly right. This is really happening, Marianne said, more to herself than to him. Having second thoughts? Constantly, but I'm staying anyway. She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Tell me this isn't completely insane. This is completely insane, like, Ethan said honestly. But I think maybe that's okay. Maybe the sane approach wasn't working for either of us. They sat in comfortable silence, the house settling around them, and Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of hope. The belief that tomorrow might be better than today, that the future held possibility instead of just more loneliness. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. We need to discuss your relationship with this woman. Call me. Ethan deleted it without responding. His mother's approval or disapproval didn't matter anymore. He'd spent too long letting other people's expectations dictate his choices. This, Marianne, Sophie, the family they were building, this was his decision, his life, his chance at happiness. My parents are going to keep pushing, he said. They don't give up easily. Let them push. We'll push back. Marianne's voice was drowsy but determined. Together, together, he echoed, and felt the words settle into his bones like a promise. They fell asleep on the couch that night, too tired to make it upstairs, wrapped around each other like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. When Ethan woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of Sophie crying, Marianne stirred with him. Nightmare? She whispered. Probably. She gets them sometimes. He started to disentangle himself, but Marianne stood too. Can I come? Or is that overstepping? Come. He took her hand and together they climbed the stairs to Sophie's room. His daughter was sitting up in bed, clutching her rabbit, tears streaming down her face. Daddy? I'm here, Bug. Bad dream? He sat on the edge of her bed, and Sophie immediately crawled into his lap. Grandma and Grandpa took me away and you couldn't find me and Marianne wasn't there and… The words tumbled out between sobs. Hey, that's not going to happen. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Ethan rocked her gently. I promise you, Sophie, you're mine, always. But they were so mean and they said they were wrong. Marianne spoke from the doorway and Sophie's head jerked up. Can I come in? Sophie nodded and Marianne entered the room, sitting on the bed next to them. Sophie, I want you to understand something. Your grandparents don't get to make decisions about your life. Your dad does. And he will never, ever let anyone take you away from him. Neither will I. But you're leaving. Sophie's voice was small, accusing. For a little while. To pack up my things and move here permanently. But I'm coming back, I promise. And when I do, I'm staying. For real. What if you change your mind? The question was devastating in its simplicity, and Ethan felt Marianne stiffen slightly beside him. But she didn't deflect or offer empty reassurances. Instead, she looked Sophie directly in the eyes. I might mess up sometimes. I might say the wrong thing or do something that hurts your feelings without meaning to. But I won't change my mind about wanting to be here. About wanting to be part of your family. That's a promise I can make and keep. Sophie studied her seriously, then held out her pinky. Pinky promise? Marianne linked her pinky with Sophie's. Pinky promise. Okay. Sophie relaxed slightly against Ethan. Can you both stay until I fall asleep? They stayed, Ethan holding Sophie while Marianne sat beside them, humming quietly. When Sophie's breathing finally evened out into sleep, they carefully extracted themselves and tiptoed from the room. In the hallway, Marianne leaned against the wall, eyes closed. I can't fail her, Ethan. I can't be another person who leaves. You won't be. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. I know you made her a promise and you meant it. I know you're terrified of screwing this up, which means you care enough to try your hardest. He pulled her close. That's all any parent can do. Try their hardest and hope it's enough. They made it to Ethan's bedroom this time, falling into bed exhausted. Marianne curled against him, her head on his chest, and Ethan stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened in the span of a few hours. 10 days ago, he'd been sitting in a restaurant, humiliated and alone. Tonight, he was lying in bed with a woman he was falling for, his daughter asleep down the hall, and a future that looked nothing like he'd planned but somehow felt exactly right. Ethan? Marianne's voice was quiet in the darkness. Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on this. On us. Thank you for showing up in the first place. He kissed the top of her head. For being brave enough to ask a stranger to marry you. Still the craziest thing I've ever done. Best crazy thing, though. Yeah, she agreed softly. Best crazy thing. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and the fragile hope of new beginning, neither of them knowing that the hardest test was still to come. Marianne left for Chicago on New Year's Day, and the house felt immediately emptier despite her promise to return. Sophie moped for the first 2 days, asking repeatedly when Marianne was coming back, if she'd changed her mind, if they should call to make sure she was okay. Ethan found himself checking his phone obsessively, waiting for updates that came in scattered texts throughout the day, photos of her apartment packed into boxes, complaints about Chicago traffic. A selfie with her resignation letter that made his heart skip with the reality of what she was sacrificing to be with them. 3 weeks maximum, she'd promised before leaving. I'll wrap everything up and be back before you know it. But 3 weeks felt impossibly long when every evening Sophie asked if today was the day Marianne returned. Ethan tried to fill the time, extra movie nights, trips to the Children's Museum, elaborate cooking projects that resulted in more mess than edible food. But the absence was palpable, a Marianne-shaped hole in their routine that made both of them realize how quickly she'd become essential. On day 12, Ethan's phone rang at 10 p.m., his mother's number. He almost didn't answer, exhaustion and dread warring in his chest. But something made him pick up, perhaps the lingering fear that she might actually follow through on her threats. Ethan, his mother's voice was clipped, formal. We need to meet. Tomorrow. It's important. If this is about custody, it's about your future. Sophie's future. 1 hour of your time. That's all I'm asking. Lunch at Marcello's at noon. Just you. Every instinct screamed to refuse, but the lawyer in his mother's voice, the one that had won courtroom battles and negotiated corporate deals, made him pause. This wasn't a request. This was a summons. Fine. 1 hour. But if you bring lawyers or start making threats, no lawyers, I promise. Something in her tone was different, less sharp. Just a conversation, Ethan. Mother to son. She hung up before he could respond, leaving him staring at his phone in confusion and apprehension. He texted Marianne immediately. My mother wants to meet tomorrow. Just me. I don't trust this. The response came within minutes. Want me to come back early? I can be on a plane tonight. Ethan smiled despite his anxiety. No. You need to finish your stuff. I can handle my mother for an hour. Probably. You're braver than you think. Call me after? Promise. The next morning, Ethan dropped Sophie at Rachel's. His sisters raised eyebrows and pointed questions about the meeting taking up most of the handoff. Then he drove to Marcello's with sweating palms and a racing heart, trying to prepare for whatever ambush his mother had planned. She was already seated when he arrived, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly mortgage, her hair perfect, her posture impeccable. But as Ethan approached the table, he noticed details he'd missed before. New lines around her eyes, a tightness to her mouth that spoke of stress, hands that fidgeted with her water glass in an uncharacteristic display of nerves. Ethan, thank you for coming. She stood, hesitated, then sat back down as he took the chair across from her. Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want? He was too tired for games, too worn down by years of disappointment to pretend civility they didn't feel. His mother flinched slightly, and Ethan felt a flash of surprise. Catherine Cole didn't flinch. She bulldozed, manipulated, controlled, but she didn't show vulnerability. I want to apologize. The words hung in the air between them, so unexpected that Ethan was certain he'd misheard. What? I want to apologize for the dinner at the Regency, for the threats, implied and otherwise, for the way we've handled everything since Claire died. His mother's voice was steady but strained, like she was forcing out words that didn't come naturally. Your father and I have been discussing things, and we've realized we've been unfair. Ethan leaned back in his chair, suspicious and confused in equal measure. Unfair, that's one word for it. We were scared. The admission seemed to cost her. When Claire died, when we saw you struggling, we convinced ourselves that you couldn't handle raising Sophie alone, that she needed more structure, more resources than you could provide. We thought we were helping by offering to take over. You thought you were helping by threatening to take my daughter away from me? We never actually filed anything. The threats were... She paused, choosing words carefully. Leverage. Badly conceived leverage meant to push you toward accepting our help. It was wrong. It was cruel. Ethan's voice was hard. You made me terrified for 3 years that you'd try to take Sophie. You made my daughter afraid of her own grandparents. That's not concern, Mom. That's control. I know. His mother's composure cracked slightly. I know, and I'm sorry. Your father is sorry too, though he's too stubborn to say it himself. We handled everything wrong. Why now? Why the sudden change of heart? Ethan couldn't help the skepticism in his tone. His parents didn't apologize. They strategized, maneuvered, won. Apologies were admissions of defeat. His mother took a sip of water, buying time. Your girlfriend, Marianne. After that dinner, she sent me an email. Very professional, very thorough. She laid out exactly why any custody action would fail, yes, but more than that. His mother met his eyes. She explained what we were doing to Sophie. The psychological impact of making a child feel unsafe with family members who should be sources of comfort. She attached research on childhood trauma, studies on stability and attachment, and she ended by asking if we actually cared about Sophie's well-being or just about winning. Ethan felt something warm bloom in his chest. Marianne hadn't mentioned sending an email, but of course she had. Of course she'd taken the lawyer's approach, facts, research, a carefully constructed argument that couldn't be dismissed as emotion. That must have been hard to read, Ethan said, not entirely without sympathy. It was a wake-up call. His mother's hands finally stilled on the water glass. We've been so focused on what we thought Sophie needed that we never asked what she actually needs. And what she needs is her father, you, Ethan, not us stepping in to fix things. You're damn right she needs me. I know that now. I should have known it all along. His mother's voice dropped. I wasn't a very present parent to you and Rachel. I was building my career, winning cases, making partner. Your father was the same. We told ourselves we were providing for you, but really we were just absent. And when you chose a different path, when you prioritized Claire and Sophie over career advancement, I think part of me resented it. Resented that you were being the kind of parent I never was. The honesty stunned Ethan into silence. He'd never heard his mother speak this way, never seen her strip away the professional armor to reveal actual vulnerability underneath. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, his mother continued. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want to do better. Not take over, not control, just be an actual grandmother to Sophie, if you'll let me. Why should I trust this? How do I know this isn't another manipulation? You don't, but I'm willing to prove it over time. His mother pulled an envelope from her purse, sliding it across the table. This is a letter from our attorney confirming we're dropping any consideration of custody action, past, present, or future. It's notarized, legal, binding. We can't use it as leverage anymore. Ethan opened the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the legal language that essentially promised his parents would never challenge his custody. It was real, official. The threat he'd lived with for 3 years dissolved into paper and ink. I don't understand. What changed? He looked up at his mother, searching her face for the catch. Marianne changed. Seeing you with her, seeing Sophie comfortable and happy, seeing you stand up to us instead of backing down, it changed our perspective. His mother's smile was sad, self-aware. And maybe I'm getting older, Ethan. Maybe I'm realizing that being right isn't the same as being family. I'd rather have a relationship with you and Sophie than win some imaginary battle over control. The waiter appeared to take their orders, and they went through the motions automatically, both still processing the weight of the conversation. After he left, his mother spoke again. Tell me about Marianne, the real story, not the version you gave us at dinner. Ethan hesitated, then figured honesty couldn't hurt worse than the lies already between them. We met 2 weeks ago. She proposed marriage to me in a restaurant after watching her own date walk out and mine do the same. His mother's eyebrows rose. That's unconventional. That's one word for it. Despite everything, Ethan felt himself smile. She looked at my life, single father, widower, kid with needs, and saw something worth choosing instead of something to run from. We agreed to try building a family together, practical partnership first, see if feelings developed. And have they? Developed? Yeah. The admission felt good, honest. I'm in love with her. Completely terrified and in love. She left for Chicago 2 weeks ago to settle her affairs, and every day she's gone feels wrong. Sophie asks about her constantly. The house feels empty without her. She's moving here? Permanently? She resigned from her firm, subleased her apartment, gave up everything to be with us. Ethan's voice held wonder and terror in equal measure. And I'm scared to death she'll realize she made a mistake, that this is too much too fast, that we're not worth what she sacrificed. His mother reached across the table, an unprecedented gesture, and covered his hand with hers. Ethan, anyone who fights for you the way she did, who walks away from a successful career to build a life with you, that woman knows exactly what she's doing. Don't insult her by assuming she's making an uninformed choice. When did you get wise about relationships? When I realized I'd wasted most of mine on being right, instead of being present. His mother squeezed his hand, then withdrew, composure reasserting itself. I'd like to see Sophie. Actually see her, not an awkward dinner where we all pretend. Maybe at your house, somewhere she's comfortable. I want to know my granddaughter Ethan before I run out of time to try. Ethan studied his mother, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motive. But all he saw was a woman in her 60s realizing she'd prioritized wrong, trying to course correct before it was too late. It didn't erase the hurt, didn't fix 3 years of fear, but it was something. We can try, he said carefully. Supervised visits at first. You prove you can be kind to her, that you're not going to undermine me or make her feel unsafe, and we'll go from there. That's fair, more than fair. His mother's relief was visible. Thank you. They finished lunch with careful small talk, rebuilding burned bridges one cautious sentence at a time. His mother asked about Sophie's school, her interests, what she wanted for her upcoming birthday. She asked about Ethan's work, about Rachel, about his plans with Marianne. And for the first time in years, the conversation felt almost normal, like they were actually family instead of opposing counsel. When they parted ways in the parking lot, his mother surprised him with a hug, brief, awkward, but genuine. I'm sorry, Ethan, for all of it. I hope someday you can believe that. I'm trying, he said, and meant it. He called Marianne from the car, needing to hear her voice to process what had just happened. She answered on the first ring, breathless. How did it go? Are you okay? Do I need to file a restraining order? She apologized. Actually apologized with paperwork proving they're dropping the custody threat. Ethan laughed, slightly hysterical. I don't know what you said in that email, but it worked. I just presented facts and asked uncomfortable questions. Attorneys hate having their logic dismantled. Marianne's voice was warm, pleased. So it's over? The threat? It's over. She wants to try being an actual grandmother. Supervised visits prove she can be trusted. He paused. Thank you for fighting for us, even when I didn't know you were doing it. That's what partners do. We fight for each other. A rustling sound came through the phone. Speaking of which, I have good news. I finished everything early. I'm coming home tomorrow. Tomorrow? Ethan's heart leaped. Really? Really. My apartment's packed, my lease is transferred, and I'm on the 8 a.m. flight. I'll be back by dinner. Her voice softened. I missed you both so much. We missed you too. Sophie's going to lose her mind when I tell her. Then don't tell her. Let's surprise her. Marianne's smile was audible. I'll text you when I land, meet you at the house. Perfect. Marianne? He paused, the words he'd been holding back for days pressing against his chest. I love you. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I need you to know before you come back. I'm in love with you. Silence on the other end, long enough that Ethan wondered if he'd miscalculated, revealed too much too soon. Then Marianne's voice came through, thick with emotion. I love you too. I think I have since you showed up at that coffee shop, even though you were terrified. Since I watched you stand up to your parents for Sophie, since... Her voice broke slightly. Since I realized you saw me as more than a convenient solution, that you were falling for me the same way I was falling for you. Come home, Ethan said, his own voice rough. Come home and let's make this official, all of it. Tomorrow, she promised. Tomorrow I'm coming home. The next day moved in slow motion. Ethan kept Sophie busy with errands and activities, watching the clock, checking his phone obsessively for Marianne's flight updates. When the text finally came, landed, getting my rental car, see you in 45 minutes, he had to physically restrain himself from shouting. Why are you so smiley today? Sophie asked suspiciously from the back seat as they drove home from the grocery store. You've been weird all day. Just happy, Bug. Can a dad be happy? You're happy crying happy. That's different. Sophie studied him. Did Marianne call? Is she coming back soon? Soon, Ethan confirmed, technically not lying. Very soon. At home, he had Sophie help put away groceries, set the table for dinner, anything to keep her distracted. When he heard a car pull into the driveway, his heart nearly exploded. He positioned himself to block Sophie's view of the window. Bug, can you grab the napkins from the dining room? We already have napkins on the table. Extra napkins, Mshkin. Or the doorbell rang, cutting him off. Sophie's head whipped toward the sound. I'll get it. She was already running before Ethan could stop her. Sophie yanked open the door, then froze. Marianne stood on the porch, suitcase beside her, hair windblown from travel, exhaustion and joy written across her face. For a suspended moment, they just stared at each other. Then Sophie launched herself forward with a shriek of pure happiness, and Marianne caught her, lifting her up, both of them laughing and crying at once. You came back! You really came back! Sophie wrapped her arms and legs around Marianne like a koala, holding on like she'd never let go. I promised, didn't I? Marianne carried Sophie inside, making eye contact with Ethan over his daughter's head. Everything he was feeling reflected back at him in her expression. Relief, love, the overwhelming rightness of this moment. I thought you'd be gone forever, Sophie said against Marianne's neck. I thought maybe you changed your mind. Never, not for a second. Marianne set Sophie down gently, crouching to her level. I'm here to stay, sweetheart. For real this time. No more leaving. Sophie studied her seriously. Promise? Promise. Marianne held out her pinky, and Sophie linked it with her own, sealing the pact. Then Sophie turned to Ethan with an expression far too knowing for a 7-year-old. So is Marianne your girlfriend now? Like, for real? Ethan glanced at Marianne, who nodded slightly. Time for honesty. Actually, Bug, we need to talk to you about that. Can we sit down? They settled in the living room, Sophie between them on the couch, sensing this was important. Ethan took a breath, trying to figure out how to explain their unconventional situation to a child. You know how we told Grandma and Grandpa that Marianne was my girlfriend for a while? That was a lie, though. Sophie's tone was matter-of-fact. I heard you and Aunt Rachel talking about it. Of course she had. Kids heard everything. You're right, it was a lie. But the truth is more complicated, and I need you to understand it. He and Marianne took turns explaining how they'd met in a restaurant, how they'd agreed to try building a family together, how what started as practical had become real. They kept it simple, age-appropriate, emphasizing that they loved each other and loved Sophie, that Marianne was choosing them on purpose. Sophie listened intently, processing with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. So you're like boyfriend and girlfriend now? For real? For real, Ethan confirmed. And Marianne's going to live here? In this house? If that's okay with you. Marianne's voice was gentle. This is your home, Sophie. Your opinion matters most. Sophie considered this. Would you sleep in Daddy's room or get your own room? Probably Daddy's room, eventually, but we can figure that out together. Okay. Sophie nodded decisively. And would you do mom things, like pack lunches and come to school stuff and know about braids? I'd love to do all of those things, if you want me to. Marianne paused. Sophie, I'm not trying to replace your mom. She was special and important and will always be part of your life. But I'm hoping I can be someone special too, in a different way. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I don't remember my mom very much anymore. Sometimes I try really hard, but I can't see her face without looking at pictures. Ethan felt his own throat tighten, pulling Sophie close. That's okay, Bug. That's normal. You were very young when she died. But Daddy remembers her, right? And he can tell me stories. Always. As many stories as you want. Sophie turned to Marianne. Would you be sad if I talked about my mom sometimes? I'd be sad if you didn't. Marianne reached out, gently brushing away Sophie's tears. Your mom was part of making you who you are. That makes her important to me, too. Okay. Sophie took a shuddering breath. Then yes. You can live here and do mom things and be in Daddy's room, but you have to promise not to leave again. I promise. Marianne pulled Sophie into a hug. I'm not going anywhere. They ordered pizza for dinner, too emotionally exhausted for cooking. Sophie chattered nonstop about everything Marianne had missed, school projects, funny things her friends said, a loose tooth that was almost ready to come out. Marianne listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, laughing at Sophie's dramatic retellings. After dinner, after Sophie's bath and the usual bedtime negotiations, they tucked her in together. Sophie grabbed both their hands. Can I ask you something? Anything, Ethan said. Are you going to get married? Like for real? Married with a wedding and everything? Ethan and Marianne exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed this explicitly, the question of actual marriage versus just living together. But looking at Marianne now, at the woman who'd upended her life to be with them, Ethan knew his answer. Would you want that? He asked Sophie. If Marianne and I got married? Yes! Sophie's enthusiasm was immediate. Then we'd be a real family, official and everything. And Marianne would be my stepmom, right? Emma has a stepmom, and she says it's like having two moms, which sounds better than one. That's very practical reasoning, Marianne said, smiling. But your dad and I would need to talk about it first, okay? Marriage is a big decision. But you'd think about it. We'll definitely think about it. Ethan kissed Sophie's forehead. Now sleep, Bug. Big day tomorrow. What's tomorrow? School. Remember that thing you go to 5 days a week? Sophie groaned but was already drifting off, exhausted from emotional whiplash. Ethan and Marianne retreated to the hallway, closing her door to a crack. So, Marianne said softly, marriage. That's on the table officially now. Is it crazy that I want to say yes? Ethan pulled her close. We've known each other 3 weeks. It's completely crazy, but then this whole thing has been crazy from the start. Marianne looked up at him. For what it's worth, I want to say yes too. Not because Sophie wants it or because it makes sense practically, because I want to be your wife. I want this family to be official and permanent. We should wait though. Do this right. Give Sophie time to adjust to you living here before we add more changes. Agreed. 6 months at least? Marianne suggested. Give us time to figure out how to actually live together, navigate the hard parts, make sure this works day to day. 6 months. Ethan kissed her, slow and deep. And then I'm proposing properly, with a ring and a plan and everything. I'm holding you to that. She pulled back slightly. Where am I actually sleeping tonight? I wasn't kidding about figuring out the room situation together. Guest room, Ethan decided. Until we're ready to explain to a 7-year-old why you're in my bed, which, knowing Sophie, will prompt questions I'm not prepared to answer. Marianne laughed. Fair enough. Show me to my temporary quarters? The next 6 months unfolded like a controlled experiment in building family from scratch. Marianne started working remotely for Morrison and Wright's local office, taking over Ethan's dining room as her temporary workspace until they could figure out something more permanent. She learned Sophie's routines, her quirks, her triggers. She attended parent-teacher conferences and school plays, helped with homework, and packed lunches that were definitely fancier than Ethan's had been. They fought, of course, about parenting decisions, about household responsibilities, about whose turn it was to deal with Sophie's dramatic meltdown over refusing to wear a coat. But they fought fair, with Sophie's well-being always the priority, and they always came back together afterward. Ethan's mother kept her word, visiting every 2 weeks for supervised time with Sophie. The first visits were stilted, awkward, but gradually something shifted. Sophie warmed up as her grandmother proved herself safe, and Catherine Cole learned to be a grandparent instead of an authority figure. She asked about Sophie's interests instead of dictating them, brought age-appropriate gifts instead of expensive electronics, sat on the floor to play instead of expecting Sophie to sit still and be appropriate. Rachel became Marianne's fiercest ally once she saw how committed Marianne was to both Ethan and Sophie. They had lunch weekly, Rachel sharing stories from Ethan's childhood, Marianne asking advice on navigating single-parent-turned-step-parent challenges. And slowly, carefully, the house that had been Ethan and Sophie's became theirs. All 3 of them. Marianne's belongings migrated from the guest room to Ethan's room once Sophie declared she understood that grown-ups who love each other sleep in the same bed, and it's not gross, it's just what they do. Her law books appeared on the shelves, her coffee mugs in the cabinet, her running shoes by the door. On a Saturday in late June, Ethan took Sophie to the park, ostensibly for the playground, actually to give him space to ask her something important. Bug, I need to talk to you about something serious. Sophie looked up from the swing set, immediately attentive. Are you sick? Is Marianne sick? Please don't be sick. Nobody's sick. Ethan sat on the swing beside her. I want to ask Marianne to marry me. Like, officially propose with a ring. But I need to know if you're okay with that. Of course I'm okay with it. Sophie's face lit up. I've been waiting for you to ask her. Emma's stepmom said you were probably being slow about it because boys are dumb about romance. Emma's stepmom sounds wise, Ethan said dryly. But this is important, Soph. If we get married, Marianne becomes legally your stepmom. That means she has a say in decisions about you. She's officially family. Are you really ready for that? Sophie stopped swinging, her expression turning serious. Daddy, Marianne already is my family. She makes my lunches and helps with my homework and knows all my favorite things. She stayed when she could have left. She chose us. Her 7-year-old wisdom struck him silent. Making it official with a wedding just means everyone else knows what we already know. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice, Sophie grinned. Can I help pick the ring? You want to help? Of course. I have opinions, and I know what she likes. So they went ring shopping together, Sophie taking the task with utmost seriousness. She rejected anything too flashy. Marianne isn't show-offy. Anything too small. It has to be special. Until she found a simple platinum band with 3 small diamonds. This one, Sophie declared, because there's 3 of us now. A diamond for each person in our family. The jeweler smiled at the logic, and Ethan felt his chest tighten with love for his daughter and the woman they were choosing together. That evening, Ethan made Marianne's favorite dinner while Sophie vibrated with barely contained excitement. Marianne noticed immediately that something was up. Okay, what's going on? You two have been weird all day. Can't we just be in a good mood? Ethan tried for innocent. Daddy's lying, Sophie announced. He's terrible at it. His eye twitches. Traitor, Ethan muttered, but he was smiling. He took a breath, nerves suddenly overwhelming him. This was real now. Official. Actually, there is something. Sophie, can you bring me the box from my nightstand? Sophie raced upstairs and returned with the ring box, presenting it to Ethan with ceremony. Marianne's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan, let me do this right. He got down on one knee in their kitchen, Sophie bouncing beside him with barely suppressed glee. Marianne Voss, 3 weeks after meeting you, I thought I was losing my mind. 6 months later, I know I lost my heart. You showed up when I'd given up hope. You chose us when everyone else ran. You've made this house a home and this collection of broken pieces into an actual family. He opened the box, showing her the ring Sophie had chosen. I'm not offering you convenience or practicality anymore. I'm offering you love, chaos, a life full of homework help and school plays, and probably more chaos than any sane person would sign up for. But it's yours if you want it. We're yours if you want us. Will you marry me? Will you officially become Sophie's stepmom and my wife and make this family permanent? Marianne was crying now, nodding before he'd finished speaking. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Ethan slipped the ring on her finger, and Sophie let out a whoop of triumph, launching herself at both of them. They ended up in a pile on the kitchen floor, laughing and crying, the 3 of them tangled together. I helped pick the ring, Sophie announced proudly. See the 3 diamonds? 1 for each of us. It's perfect. Marianne kissed Sophie's forehead, then Ethan's lips. You're both perfect. This whole ridiculous, wonderful thing is perfect. They planned the wedding for October. Small, intimate, just family and close friends in the backyard they'd spent the summer making beautiful together. Sophie served as flower girl and junior bridesmaid, taking both roles with utmost seriousness. Rachel cried through the entire ceremony. Even Ethan's mother dabbed at her eyes when Marianne's vows promised to honor Claire's memory while building new memories together. But the moment that broke everyone was when the officiant asked if anyone had words to say, and Sophie spoke up without prompting. I just want to say that Marianne is the best almost mom anyone could ask for. She does my hair and makes good lunches, and she stayed when she could have left. And I'm really happy she's officially my family now because she's been my family in my heart for a long time. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The reception was chaos. Sophie racing around with her cousins, Rachel giving an embarrassing speech about Ethan's dating disasters, Marianne's parents warmly welcoming him into their family. As the evening wound down and Sophie finally crashed on Rachel's lap, Ethan pulled Marianne onto the makeshift dance floor. "So," he said, swaying with her under string lights, "any regrets about proposing to a stranger in a restaurant?" "Best impulse decision I ever made." Marianne rested her head on his shoulder. "Though I should probably stop making life-changing decisions in restaurants." "I don't know. Seems to be working out for you." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Mrs. Cole." "I love you too." She pulled back to look at him. "Thank you for taking a chance on something crazy, for seeing possibility instead of just risk. Thank you for showing up, for staying, for choosing us." Sophie stirred on Rachel's lap, blinking sleepily. "Is it time to go home?" "Soon, Bug." Ethan walked over, scooping up his daughter. "You did great today. Best flower girl ever." "And junior bridesmaid," Sophie reminded him, already half asleep again. "Are we really all married now? Like official family?" "Official family," Marianne confirmed, joining them. "You're stuck with me forever." "Good," Sophie mumbled. "I like being stuck with you." They drove home through October darkness, Sophie asleep in the back seat, wedding decorations still scattered across their backyard. Ethan carried Sophie to bed while Marianne changed out of her wedding dress into comfortable clothes. When he came back downstairs, she was standing in the kitchen, looking at the photos on the refrigerator, new ones of the three of them mixed in with older photos of Claire, creating a visual timeline of loss and healing and new beginning. "She'd be happy for you," Marianne said quietly. "Claire, I think she'd be glad Sophie has someone who loves her the way I do." "She would." Ethan wrapped his arms around Marianne from behind. "You know what the crazy part is? A year ago, if someone had told me I'd meet my wife by getting rejected on a blind date, I would have thought they were insane. A year ago, if someone told me I'd propose to a stranger and end up with a ready-made family, I would have checked myself into therapy." Marianne leaned back against him. "But here we are." "Here we are," he echoed. "Three people who found each other in the least conventional way possible and somehow made it work. We made it work because we were honest from the start. No games, no pretending, just two broken people deciding they'd rather be broken together than perfect alone." That's very poetic for someone who spent the day wrangling a 7-year-old flower girl. "I contain multitudes." She turned in his arms. "Come on, husband, let's go to bed. Tomorrow starts the rest of our chaotic, beautiful life, and I want to be well rested for it." Tomorrow, Sophie's going to ask if we can get a dog now that we're officially married. "I know. I'm actually warming to the idea." "You're going soft." "I'm going happy," Marianne corrected. "There's a difference." They climbed the stairs together, passing Sophie's room where their daughter slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that her family was whole. In their room, Marianne's wedding dress hung on the closet door, Ethan's suit jacket tossed over a chair, evidence of a day that had made official what their hearts had known for months. What started as rejection on Christmas night had become this, a family built on courage, honesty, and the radical decision to stop playing it safe. They'd taken the risk of being real with each other, of admitting needs and fears without pretense, and somehow, impossibly, it had been enough, more than enough. It had been everything.